Good afternoon, evening. Welcome to open comment prior to closed session. Laura Capps sitting in for our president, Wendy Sims-Moten, who is, if I could, thank you, who is traveling for work. So we have 4 board members tonight, so any votes that are taken, if they're unanimous, it'll be 4-0. Right now, I'd like to call any public comment. Dr. Reed.
Yes, so we have 2 public comments for closed session items. Let's see. B4. We have 2 closed session item public comments for B4, and that would be Ellen, is it Varento, and then Sheridan Rosenberg. So if we could have those 2. Oh, we have a third. The topic is the name of the Fair Education Santa Barbara, Inc. versus Santa Barbara Unified School District and Just Community Central Coast. So we have, Ellen, and then Sheridan, and then we have Jake Hannell. Those are the 3.
Greetings. Good evening. My name is Sheridan Rosenberg. I am the parent of a current student at Olive Grove, and I am an officer of Fair Education Santa Barbara. My daughter was at Santa Barbara High last year until we pulled her out because the conditions were untenable. I suspect you read today's Newshawk article concerning Just Communities and the information and what was actually happening in this program, and this board is paying Just Communities hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to teach our students, teachers, and staff. I'm sure you saw the email from a concerned parent that was addressed to this board and to Superintendent Matsuoka that said that her son was driven to having suicidal thoughts after participating in Just Communities program after hearing that his classmates hated him because of the color of his skin and that he was an oppressor of his classmates due to his skin color. I am shocked that only one of you deigned to even respond to this parent's email. She was calling out for your help and you ignored her. I'm sure you also saw the declaration from a former teacher explaining that her students were coming out of Just Communities programs traumatized and that she herself was harassed to this training due to her skin color. Fair Education also has grave concerns about the hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars being spent not only on Just Communities, but also on outside organizations to evaluate Just Communities and the spiraling web of other interconnected nonprofit groups that are being lavished with grant money that this district simply does not have. You say that this is LCAP money, but the LCAP funding was based in part on a representation that the district was in full compliance with the Williams Act. Not that there was no complaints, but that there was 100% compliance. That representation was false. Our students deserve better than to be indoctrinated with Just Communities propaganda when they could be learning basic skills to be used in the real world. I believe there is something terribly amiss with the amount of money being directed to these outside nonprofit groups, and Fair Education intends to get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that we provide 3 minutes for each public comment, and I give a 30-second warning to warn you that you're almost up. All right, so we'll have the next person, Jake Hannell. Is he here?
Hi folks, I'm Jake Hamill and I go to DP. I'm a senior there, and just going through my history at DP with bullying and stuff in spring of 2019. I was bullied due to having conservative values, being white, male, and Christian. And I was called racist by a Muslim at my school, and during our intervention where he was found by DP to be the bully and myself as the victim. He later admitted during the intervention that I had done nothing racist towards him. And then also in spring of 2019, I was assaulted and cold-cocked in the face by an African American. He also called me a racist when he justified his assault on me. He admitted during his intervention that he was the perpetrator of the assault, and that was when I talked to the bullying counselor at my school, Nate Mendoza, and that I had never been racist towards him or others. He thought I had to be racist because I was white, conservative, Christian, and male. In fall of 2019, the same Muslim I referred to earlier was assaulted me with punches. I wrestled him to the ground in self-defense. I was given a school suspension along with the bully for defending myself, and they claimed that we had equal assault on the fight that occurred. And basically he lied on the Stop It Anonymous Bullying report site that I called him a dirty Muslim bomber. I was given, I already said that. Bully later threatened my family and myself with a knife on social media and was expelled from the high school. Just Communities teaches to justify this type of behavior, as you teach that white Christian conservative males are the bane of our society. You are putting me and the rest of the youth at risk of physical harm with this rhetoric.
Thank you. Thank you. And could we have Ellen Warren, please?
Hello. Just a very brief statement. In retrospect, I, for one, am so relieved at the board's prevarication in releasing Just Communities curriculum to parents, because now it will come out in other ways, and I think these are preferable ways, actually. If it wasn't up to par to be in the formal school curriculum, then it shouldn't be in the schools at all. Looking at the background, educational and professional background of Jared Schwartz, for one example, among others, his educational background does not indicate a person who should be working in schools with children, particularly in a situation where trauma, upset, and these kinds of highly personal and hot-button issues are discussed and explored. His degree is a Master of Science in Organizational Development from the American University in Washington, D.C., and after which he spent many years, as far as I know, up to the current time, in organizational studies, group studies, with an organization called the Arthur Kenneth Rice Institute, which is a U.S. spin-off of the Tavistock Institute in the UK. This organization basically studies groups and studies themselves. As they're having group dynamics, they study the dynamics as they come up. It's like the study of groups. That's the best way I can describe it. Several books have been published on their activities and the methods that they use, methodologies, and a lot of it has to do with studying group dynamics. I don't think that background alone, and that does seem to be the bulk of the background that's putting him in classrooms with kids and camps with kids, is the kind of thing that is up to the level of professional requirement or the professional standards that would be able to handle the kinds of things that are coming up that we're reading in the declarations and that we're probably going to continue to read about. That's a personal opinion, but I think it is well worth contemplating and looking back at that background in some detail. And by the way, I got this information from the archives that exist in Washington, D.C. of that organization, and I have membership lists, conference brochures. I have the actual original documentation that indicate that background
30
of training.
seconds.
So I'd like people to look at that if they can and rethink putting someone of that educational background and activity background in these situations with the kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The rest of the public comments here are for after we come back from closed session, unless there's any others that we missed.
I may have mistitled mine. I put it as 7. I apologize.
It's C7, which is public comment, not in closed session.
For closed session.
Okay, come on. Yeah, what's the topic?
The fair education closed session.
Okay, this one? Okay, thank you. Come on down.
Oh, thanks.
There. Thank you very much. My name is James Fankner. I would like to read portions of a signed declaration from Katie Hedden. She was a wonderful 8th grade teacher at La Colina Junior High School. It's a school where 3 of my daughters have or are attending. With respect to the Talking in Class program, I was required by Just Community's administrator to select several students in my class to attend the program. I was specifically told by Just Communities to only select students of Hispanic ethnicity to attend the Talking in Class program. Teachers are not permitted to attend the Talking in Class program, and as far as I was made aware, the curriculum was not available for review. I became concerned about the Talking in Class program when several of my students returned to my class from participating in the program, visibly upset and not wanting to return. In particular, I discussed the program with one student who was extremely upset and emotional and informed me that in the program the students were instructed to yell out names they had been called in the past, and many of them were racially charged slurs. I was told that this brought up traumatic memories for this particular student and that he did not want to attend the program any longer. I felt that this curriculum was too much for even high school students, let alone middle school and junior high students. I also discussed the issue with the Just Communities facilitator running the program, who confirmed what had occurred. Upon further investigation, I learned that the Just Community facilitators running the Talking in Class program are not trained teaching professionals and are not trained in this area. Which brings me to a couple questions. The first is, why are we misusing LCAP funds to pay an outside organization to actively segregate and traumatize students? Why are we paying non-credentialed teachers to teach our students from a secret curriculum nobody is allowed
30
to
seconds.
see? Thank you, Dr. Reed, because I think we all know what time it is. It's time to expel Just Communities. We have to expel them from our school district. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes our public comment for closed session.
Thank you. We will now retreat into closed session and return for open session. Thanks to everyone for being here. Okay. If everyone could please sit down. Thanks for joining us. I call to order the Santa Barbara Unified School Board meeting on September 10th. I am Laura Capps, the Vice President, who is sitting in for Wendy Sims-Moten, our President, who is absent due to her work. So we have 4 board members here tonight, so when it's a unanimous vote, please note that that is 4-0. So welcome. With that, Mr. Matsuoka, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Buenas tardes, tenemos interpretación al español por si alguien gusta escuchar la presentación en español. Good evening. In order to provide language access, we have Spanish interpretation available.
Thank you. And also, headsets for the hearing impaired are available, and please indicate if one is needed. And with that, I'll move to item C4, which is announcement of closed session action. We have one action to report, item B3. In the case of a classified employee, the board voted unanimously 4-0 for a retirement agreement in the amount of $8,548. And that is it with closed session. Superintendent's report, Mr. Matsuoka.
The last, 10 days, Santa Barbara has experienced another difficult tragedy. We were out of town when we heard about, first it was just a boat fire, and then it became a larger event, and then by the time we rolled back into town, we started to realize the extent of the Conception fire. Whether you're a boater or a scuba diver or somebody, I think it's events like this that realize, Santa Barbara's a small town, and we may know people who were part of that. I noticed that there was a family from Santa Cruz at a charter school that I used to go by many, many times, and so it's sad that we've lost so many lives. So would you just bow with me and let's just have a moment of silence in honor of those who lost their lives. Thank you. Wanted to share with the board and the community. So the visual and performing arts are a vital part of our district, and so Sean Carey, Raul Ramirez, and myself, we started a series of meetings last spring with the staff, and it's been an open invitation to all staff, and it's been really valuable for the three of us to hear what's going well and the challenges. And one thing that I've realized is the visual and performing arts is a really broad space, because we have teachers who are leading instrumental music, choral music, drama, two-dimensional art, three-dimensional art, sculpture. I mean, it's such a broad space, and we have come to appreciate them. The musicals are going to start rolling through our high schools pretty soon, so just encourage all of you to participate in that. And the board has asked me over the last couple of years, what can we do to support the arts? And so we're having ongoing conversations with them, and just know that I think this is going to pay dividends for us, K-12. So just wanted to share that. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Now we'll move to item 6, any board comments and correspondence. Looking at my colleagues. Ms. Ford.
Thank you so much. I was lucky and honored to attend another county executive board meeting on September 5th, and there was a terrific presentation made by the superintendent, county superintendent, Susan Salcedo, and really just reminding all of us about the amazing program and offerings that we have at the county. And also she was helpful in helping me, and I think many others there, understand the differences between what boards do at the county level, what the county board does, and what this board does, or any district boards do. So I'll be sharing that information with my colleagues on the board. Also, I loved the back-to-school nights I attended at Dos Pueblos, Santa Barbara Junior High, and then later this week will be Santa Barbara High School, my alma mater. I'm particularly excited to report that both Ms. Capps and I attended the Kingdom Choir concert at the Santa Barbara Bowl yesterday, where at least 3,000 students from the county were treated to an amazing concert. And it just reminded me how much the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation does for our students, and particularly the outreach program, and how many grants they make in the spirit of promoting and supporting performing arts for youth. So it was an honor, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Any others? Yes, Ms. Munoz.
Yes, certainly. I'm looking forward to the back-to-school nights. I'll be at La Cumbre Junior High tomorrow, and then at Adams School on Monday. I'm looking forward to being a part of that. And then this weekend, I also attended the Out of Darkness Walk here in the community, and was very pleased to have Brian Waganek and other members of the community also, come together and address, mental health in our community, and focus on our youth also.
Thank you. Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I'm going to chime in as well. So just to say that I was at the back-to-school nights for Dos Pueblos and Monroe, 2 extremely different back-to-school nights, but fabulous and well-attended, I might add. And I'm looking forward to going to La Cumbre, so I'll see you there, Board Trustee Munoz. But what's exciting when you attend these events is just to see the joy and, and then, also like the nervousness of the parents. But it was great to see leadership like Mr. Naughton here as principal at Monroe, really providing an overview of all that they do give to the school as teachers. And what I loved about Monroe is each of the teachers came out with a different song, sort of kind of to set the tone of who they were, and it brought a lot of laughter, and I think I felt like, wow, I like these teachers. They've got some good music choices going on. So anyway, I just want to acknowledge all the administration, because this is a difficult time with all of the just getting things rolled out, and I want to acknowledge that and all the teachers and principals and say, I'm excited for this year. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll chime in on the Kingdom Choir, just to elaborate on Ms. Ford. It was incredible performance that our students got to see. The Kingdom Choir, for those of you who might not know, they performed for the royal wedding last year in the UK, and then the night before was at the Hollywood Bowl. So then they come to our students next, and I put it on Facebook, and an adult wrote back, "I'm jealous. How did they get to?" And that's as it should be, right? Our students should have this kind of experience. And the choir director was just so talented in explaining the music and really giving these students an education. And just to be at the bowl, the 400 students from Franklin walked there with their teachers, supervised, and I was in line kind of with one of them, and I get excited walking up the bowl, and this little student said, "Wow, you could fit all of Santa Barbara in here." I mean, it's so big, and those steps and walking up that hill is such a trek. So anyway, it was incredible, and just a big thank you to the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation and our partnership with our schools. It's really important. Thank you.
Ms. Capps, I have one other.
Yes.
I was reminded a couple weeks ago, we were fortunate to have a visit by State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman. So Mr. Thurman is responsible for all of public education in California, 6.2 million students. And he was in the county speaking to superintendents. And so we scheduled a visit to San Marcos High School. And probably the highlight was watching him interact with the ASB leadership of San Marcos High School. He's a really good guy. His ability to connect with students was fabulous. And we gave him an earful about all the things that we need in our local education system. But I was really glad that he took the time out to visit students and classes and teachers at San Marcos High School.
Sure. Dr. Reed, one more.
Yeah, just to add on to that, what was really cool about it was that he was on a schedule. And he said, and the principal said, we need to move on. And he's like, no, I really want to talk to these students. I really want to hear what they have to say. And so he really reached out. He remembered their names. He focused on each student. He said, I remember you mentioned this. And so to me, that was really a big deal. It was like we all, we know that they have to come. They have to meet the standards of what they need to do. But I could really feel the authenticness of him wanting to get to know the students and want to connect. And so I just think that we're lucky to have him. Thank you.
Great. And with that, we will move on to item D, acceptance of donations. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. Let's move to public comment.
So we have public comment, and I'm going to call 3 people at a time. We provide you with 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, I give you a warning, and then that gives you time to just provide closure to your statement. So I'm going to start with Olivia, and please, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. So just bear with me. Olivia Carranza, Ellen Warren, and Ms. Harper, and Ms. Ritter. So we're going to have, I'm sorry, Albert Oaten. Sorry. So those 3 first?
Let's read them again.
Thank you. Olivia? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Olivia Carranza, and I am a mother of 3 children. And tonight I'm here to talk about a concern that I have. I represent as well, I'm a parent coordinator for Future Leaders of America, and some parents and myself are very concerned about some of the requirements that our children are getting in the high schools in order to graduate. We have seen that a lot of our students in our community are not getting enough credits or the correct credits in order to graduate high school and get the possibility to apply to a 4-year university. Most of our students are not getting these credits. Most of our students get into high school, they graduate, however, they do not have these A through G requirements classes. So I'm very concerned about that. I've been part of ELAC, DLAC for so many years. My oldest daughter is 22 years old right now, and she attends Santa Barbara City College. Sadly, I said that. I have a 17-year-old, and because I've learned the hard way with my oldest daughter that she never got the A through G classes through her high school, I never learned as a parent about A through Gs. I never learned that when she would graduate, she will not get these classes, these credits, and she will not be able to apply to any university. That's why she had to go to City College and revalidate all these classes in order to get all the credits that she needs in order to be a transfer student, hopefully soon, within this year, hopefully to UCSB or any other university. So most of the parents in my community are in the same boat, and most of our students are not getting these opportunities. So right now, high school has 2 paths for the students to graduate. One is with credits, the other one is with no credits. And when I talk about credits, I'm talking about the A through G requirements. Some of the students, and most of my students in our community, are the ones that are not getting these credits. They're not even being informed of these credits. Some seniors are graduating, or some juniors are about to graduate, and they have never heard about A through Gs. And that is
30
a
seconds.
horrible concern of mine. So I'm asking the community here to know about this missing opportunity that we're not giving to all the students in the high schools. And this is in Santa Barbara County, and it's unacceptable. I've been in meetings and meetings and meetings, and they talk about some certain things, but they are not really telling us the truth. And our children are hurting so much. We need to stop. We need to have one path to college. And I'm requesting the board to please consider this, change it for every student to have the same opportunities.
Thank
so
you.
As parents, we don't have to guess. Is my child going to be with credits or without credits? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Board. Among the many conflicts of interest that we have discovered in our research between the board here and Just Community Central Coast, we were particularly surprised recently to find using GuideStar.com, which is a website that is used for looking at incorporation documents and tax documents, and particularly 501c3 incorporation documents, that on the originating documentation for JCC's 501c3 dated December 30th, 2018, we saw Fran Wajcik's name there listed as an incorporating director, assigned as a director to incorporate that organization, and also listed as secretary as well on that document. And there are hardly any words to describe how bad it looks to have zero daylight at all between a board, administrators, a superintendent, et cetera, and a so-called community partnering 501c3 that has thus far evaded competitive bidding, as we've discussed many times before. So we just want to point out that particular among many other conflicts that are very evident to anybody looking through publicly available information. And we'd just like to put that into the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Albert?
Hi, my name is Albert. I have 2 boys. One of them is at DP right now. I went back to the Dos Pueblos back to school night, and I have a request. Mrs. Superintendent, Carrie, I request that you make a call to Mrs. Harper, who teaches math compaction, and tell her that one of the parents was so grateful for her thoughtful deployment of a new grading system that focuses on mastery, not compliance. She eliminated homework as a grading criteria and replaced it with twice-a-week quizzes that kids can retake as much as they want, because she wants to emphasize mastery, not compliance. I'd also ask that you call Mrs. Ritter, who teaches chemistry. She emphasized critical thinking and problem solving, curiosity instead of rote memory. She encouraged kids to try, to experiment, to fail as a means of finding answers, not just getting the right answer. The impact is more substantial than you might think. My son has ADHD, like 1 in 10 boys. We had him tested because we can afford it, but I worry about families that can't, especially kids that may also have compounding factors like ESL and ADHD. To give you a notion of what that is, because what I've become aware of as a teacher, and probably you don't know really what it means. My son his math intelligence was the highest they'd seen at 99th percentile plus. It means he could answer questions as an 8-year-old with things like, if you're driving at 50 miles an hour from Los Angeles and I'm driving 60 miles an hour from Santa Barbara, where would we meet and in how long? He could do that in his head. But his academic fluency, he was 99 plus on intelligence. His academic fluency with 18th percentile. Academic fluency is considered automatic rapidity. And what that means is if you gave him a sheet of paper with 8 plus 7, 8 times 7, 8 divided by 7, he was scoring the 18th percentile. It's rote, it's automation, it's not critical thinking like the problem that I gave you. The impact is this. He was put in a lower math class in the 7th grade. They ended up taking, out of just random happenstance, a national test to see who would qualify for a national math competition in DC. He was one of 7 kids that scored high enough and was selected to be on that team. 6 of them were in the high-performing math class.
30 seconds.
He was not in that high-performing math class, but he was one of the 7 top. When you have ADHD, you are unlikely to turn in homework on time. If you do the homework, you're unlikely to turn it in. If you do turn it in, you're unlikely to have followed the instructions to turn it in correctly and get a good grade. So what I'm asking is that Ms. Ritter and Ms. Harper are on the right track. I'd ask that you support them. I'd ask that you pay attention to what they're doing. I'd ask that you try and encourage other teachers to do the same. I'd also ask that you support Just Communities, because they try and bring awareness about ADHD to all those teachers and help kids like mine and the other 1 in 10 boys and girls that have ADHD.
Thank you very much. We'll move forward now with 3 more, Sheridan Rosenberg, John Morris, and Sherry Ray.
Thank you. I'm just picking up where I left off. So basically, my concern is that, well, I have numerous concerns, but obviously. But, anyone who read Ms. Hedden's declaration, I think you all should know that Mr. Matsuoka was fully aware of what was going on at the time. And I find that deeply troubling. I also find it deeply troubling that this district has paid an attorney enormous amounts of money to give the district illegal legal advice. If that was my attorney, I would have fired him years ago. So that's enough on that topic. But I really want to reflect on 2 things. Not long ago, I read a book that absolutely changed my life. It's a book about dyslexia written by an extraordinary woman, Sherry Ray McKinney, who happens to be here. And it really did change my life. I had an IEP kid, my son, who now, because he was fortunate enough to go to Laguna Blanca from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, is now a senior with honors at Belmont University in Nashville. I believe, absolutely, had he gone through the public school system here, he probably wouldn't have even graduated from City College. It's inexcusable. It's just inexcusable. You guys are raking in enormous amounts of money. Why are you at a $10 million shortfall? Why do the facilities look third world? Why is it that you have 3 schools, let's see, Cleveland, McKinley, and Harding, that are what, at 80 to 90% failure rate? There is no reason why all of our schools cannot be as fabulous as Laguna. We are an extraordinarily tight-knit community. You were right about that. We're different than other places. It's why I still live here. We are really special because we look after each other. And the one thing we're not doing is looking after our public schools. This is about stewardship. It's about malfeasance. It's about, in my opinion, a willingness to double and triple down, even when you knew full well about the abuse for years going on. You knew for years that the Matt Academy was a problem. But everybody covers and everybody hides and everybody pays a lawyer to cover it up. And those that knew shouldn't be here anymore. I think that it's time to turn the page. Also, I wanted to just point out that the LCAP monies, the perfect use would have been for chaperones, like substitute teachers or teachers, for the sleepaway science camp. No child should be deprived of that opportunity to go to that camp. There's plenty of money, had you not been bucketing it to your buddies in these nonprofits, so that every single one of those kids could have been chaperoned properly with a substitute teacher. So I just think that it's time for you to get in the huddle and have a real conversation about your priorities, because it really doesn't feel like it's about the kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm John Morse. I'm a member of Fair Education Santa Barbara. I want to go on the record that I was deprived of my 3 minutes last time I was before the board. I was told I was cut off at 3 minutes. The video shows very clearly I was cut off at 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I'm here tonight to talk about the facilities, some of the Williams Act complaints. Number one, I'm not sure we've ever received a final report on what has been done with the PA systems at Dos Pueblos and Santa Barbara High, which were specific complaints made on Williams Act forms. And I know there's talk about putting in a position to have phone service come in, self-service to alert the people if there's an emergency. I would suggest that that would be a backup. It doesn't take the place of a fully functioning PA system. You know, if you have a cell tower go down or you have cell phone batteries that are weak, it doesn't do the job. But I also want to talk about another Williams Act complaint that we filed recently, for which we've not yet received a response. And that's the Williams complaint that says that the windows in Santa Barbara High, many of them cannot be opened. And that's a serious safety issue. So no matter how good your PA system is, no matter how good your system is for notifying when there's an emergency, it doesn't do much good if people can't get out the classrooms. So I would urge you to make that a priority to take care of those windows. Now, for the record, I'm not using the rest of my time.
Thank you. So after Sherry Ray, we have Jill Rivera, and then Moni, and then it looks like Greg Hamill. We have 2 names, but only one of these speaker cards can be used for one person. So you might think who will come up for that. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Ray. I'm a community member. I wish I didn't have to speak about this in public tonight, but my efforts to address it in the way that I have for dozens of students for many years have gone unanswered by the special education director. A week ago, I attended an IEP as a volunteer advocate for a dyslexic 6th grader reading at a 2nd grade level. He's been in special education since 2015 and has made no significant progress in his reading, writing, spelling, and math since then, despite being in special education for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week last school year. He's a bright child, a struggling reader. His mother and I were assured, however, in the IEP that 1 hour a day of reading and writing instruction by a teacher who has had exactly 2 days of specialized instruction in dyslexia would be fine. They wouldn't even include grade levels on his goals because they knew there is no reasonable way for him to achieve anything close to grade level with that wholly inadequate intervention when he needs extensive remediation through no fault of his own. 10 years ago, when my own dyslexic son was at 7th grade, reading at a 2nd grade level, the district agreed to pay for him to receive extensive, private, evidence-based remedial services. I subsequently wrote about that experience in the October 28th, 2010 edition of The Independent as a cover story. And I redirected at that time my own career to help the district improve its dyslexia services so that other parents and children would not endure what we did. Unfortunately, the significant progress made under the previous administration has not continued, as evidenced by business-as-usual approach that this student is currently receiving and was supposedly one of the best elementary schools in the district. I'd also like to mention that during that same meeting last week, the teacher seemed unaware of her own violation of the right to privacy that every child is due under FERPA. She nonchalantly showed the mother and I the standardized testing results of both the IEP child and another student. When I asked her if that indeed was what she was showing us, she hastily scribbled out the other child's information. Because of these serious lapses, I'm very concerned, and I'd like to ask for a FCMAT report of the Special Education Department. When this was done a few years ago, the FCMAT team came back and they stated students come into this district with learning disabilities and they leave with
30
emotional
seconds.
disturbances. I believe that is still the heartbreaking case. This school district has children for 13 years, and what happens during that time determines whether or not that child has the opportunity to reach their full potential. In this case, this bright student wants to be a scientist, but who knows what discoveries that he might make or maybe never get the chance. It really depends on your leadership, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm going to be addressing some concerns that we've been raising for the last year regarding just communities. And we've heard a lot of people comment about the program favorably, unfavorably, but what we haven't heard are from the kids, okay? And many of you may know that in today's News Hawk, there's an article wherein a student is quoted. And this student is talking about how damaged they were from the Just Communities Talking in Class program. And I'm going to just read it. The email states, the email was sent to Santa Barbara Unified School District, Board of Education. So all you guys already know what this is about, but you maybe not. The Board of Education in August 2019 alleged that the first day the student participated in the Talking in Class training, he came home crying, saying that he hated being white. Mom, for just a moment, I truly felt like killing myself today. The email quotes the boy as saying, the email states that after the training, the student sometimes says he hates being white. He also told me, his mother, that he felt like he was a disgrace because he did not speak Spanish. Now, you're only as strong as your weakest member. Who's speaking up for these kids? Who's taking care of these kids? You guys have hired these nonprofits to come into our schools. They're not vetted. They don't adhere to a code of conduct in many cases that I can see, Exhibit A, Pablo Sweeney at the Matt Academy. And yet our kids are subjected to classes they're teaching. We don't see the curriculum. We can't see the curriculum because it's third party. It's not supplemental. If it's such a great program, why don't we have the opportunity to see the curriculum? Okay? And to see a child like this talking about killing themselves from going to an after-school program, that's pretty serious. And I just wonder how many kids are represented by this young boy that do not have the power to speak up, that do not have parents, maybe they don't speak English, maybe they don't know how to advocate for their kid. But I say one kid's enough. And I think this program is damaging, I think it's divisive, and I'm tired of you guys hiding all of the curriculum and covering it up. So, enough.
Thank you. So we have Moni and then Greg or Mike Hamill.
Hello, board. Nice to be here to talk to you again. Or actually, I'm reminded that the last time I was here speaking, a father of someone with dyslexia actually broke down in tears to you, Superintendent. Most of the board was here. He was crying because none of his issues for his daughter had been addressed. And as you know, many things here for people with dyslexia are unattended. They are an invisible group. And I also would like to agree with our first speaker, the A through G classes. What we have here in Santa Barbara actually is a social justice issue. Literacy is a human right. And it is, yeah. And the tough part here, whether you like it or not, because I've talked to many of you, even the superintendent, and you often say that you don't have the will or capacity to be in compliance with the law that says you have to take care of children with a free and appropriate education. So if you can't read, you need a lot of intense intervention. I can tell you because I'm dyslexic, my son is dyslexic, he had to go to a private school because he couldn't get a free and appropriate education here. So to continue, I also want to tell you the gentleman who broke down in tears, all he got from you guys was 30 seconds. And you know what he got from us? We put him on Facebook. We got 4,700 hits, and people all over the country, just from that soundbite, were so emotionally connected that they've come forward to help him. And I know, like Laura, you're very concerned, the food bank, feeding kids. The same group that you help feed, that's deep poverty. Their minds need to be fed, because you know what happens if they don't get the A through G? They don't go to college. So it does become a racial issue, it becomes a social justice issue, and it's not right. You know, you go to Harding, you go to all the schools where the children are in deep poverty, those same students, 95% go to the food bank. Those kids need one-on-one intervention, not your little pull-out program with 4 or 5 other kids for 20 minutes. It does nothing. That's why I took my son to private school, and I didn't have the means. I went under duress. So get on it, take some action, follow the law, and stop wasting money on just communities and think about literacy. Okay, I'm angry because I want action, and I've been here year after year after year. And I'm not the only one. Joan Esposito, this town is against helping this group. We're invisible and we're not being heard. And I don't think it's right.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I see that. Now there's 26, 25, 24. Let me explain to you the scope of the problem. There are 15,000 students. Real easy math here. 1 in 5 has dyslexia. So on all your numbers, and I know you report it low, there should be at least 3,000 students getting interventions if you do the math, 1 in 5. But they're not. And your pull-out programs don't cut it. They just don't. My son needed one-on-one intervention for 2 summers. It was pricey, and he deserves it.
Thank you.
So do your kids, by the way.
So last public comment is either Mike or Greg Hamill.
So I am Greg Hamill. Jake, my son, some of you weren't here, but he gave a very stirring recitation of what just communities has caused at our school. We've referred to it as unjust communities, because if you're white, he got beat up for being a white conservative, his school, and his administration tried to put it under the rug. Okay, they told him after a kid hit him, cold-cocked him, because he was conservative and called a racist. We never said anything racist. They're trying to deny the kid ever hit him. Now, we went back to the school this fall, and it's scary. Types of things happen in China, not here, okay? So I'm listening to, I understand there's this unjust, this just, whatever you want to call it, communities thing. You're talking about funding and how money's exchanging hands and all this. Who knows if it's right or wrong? But I'll tell you, you need to know that when all that curriculum hits the ground with the kids, it's divisive. There's violence in your schools because of it, in your schools, because of what you people have flowed down to the teachers, and the kids pick it up. And now they are hitting people based on their race and their political views. You need to know this. And luckily, my son is brave enough to do this, because we're going to be really unpopular. We know it. You know, his name is Mud at that school with administrators and all the cool people who go for this just thing. But he's not the only one. There are kids that are smaller than him. They get picked on, and they're afraid to bring this forward. And thank God my son has done this for them. Okay? And I watched him give his speech to you people, and not one of you had any empathy in your face for when he described his assault. None of you went afterwards to say, we're sorry. You went into your room. This boy was assaulted in your school based on his skin color. Shame. If he were black, this would be all over. You guys would be running it up the pole to CNN. Shame. Okay? So I got my 30 seconds. I didn't really plan on coming up here and speaking. I think I've said what I've said. And the other thing I asked the lawyer is, can we see this Just Communities curriculum so I can know what I'm up against? Answer. Do you guys have any? Can I see it? Can one of you answer me? Can one of you answer me? Can I have it? Can I see it? Can we email it to each other? We paid for it. I guess there's no answer. Their answer is, because it's so bizarre, you're afraid for us to see it. That's the answer.
Thank you for your public speech. Ms. Capps, I believe that's all of public comment for tonight.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item D, the acceptance of donations. Do I have a motion?
I move to accept with gratitude donations for September 10th, 2019.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving on to the next agenda item, item E, consent agenda. Do any of my board members have any items to pull? No?
No.
Great. Then remind me if we need a motion to approve.
Right.
Yes. Thank you. So then we need a motion on the table to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We will move to the item F, the action agenda. Item F1. If I could have a motion, please, Dr. Reed?
Yeah, I move to approve the petition for readmission of an expelled student, Education Code 48918, case number 201819-19, for, let's see, from expulsion for enforcement suspended for one semester ended on June 20, let's see, June 20, it's not coming up here, is it 19?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item F2. Do we have a motion on the table?
Yes. I move to approve Student Discipline Education Code 48918, case number 20192003, for the stipulated agreement for expulsion with enforcement suspended for 2 semesters, which ends June 2020.
All in favor? I'm sorry, we need a second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item F3, Dr. Wagnick, approval of purchase order with Maxim Healthcare Services for 2019 to 2020.
Thank you, Board. Good evening, Mr. Matsuoka, Ms. Capps, Board. So we bring to you this contract with Maxim. We've been in contract with them for the last several years because of, we've relied on them as substitute and a contracted agency to fill paraprofessional positions that we are unable to fill through the traditional hiring process. We're seeking approval for a purchase order with maximum not to exceed $1.8 million. Last year, the contract reached $988,000. This financial commitment is already captured in our special education budget and is included in the adopted budget for 2019-2020. And John Shetler is here. We are available to take any questions that you have.
Any questions from my colleagues? Ms. Ford?
We did receive some data, but I didn't see, and forgive me if I'm wrong, any of the current data. Do you know how many positions are unfilled as of today?
As of September 5th, I have that data.
Okay.
We had 59 vacant positions. Of those, 49 were filled by Maxim, and 10 were still vacant.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, we might need to, with the noise outside, maybe, I think it will subside in a little bit, but maybe, thank you, Sandra. Any other questions from the board? None for me. Oh, sorry, Dr.
I don't
Ms.
have a
Ford.
question, but a comment whenever you would.
Sure. Questions and comments?
Approve that? Okay. I just would like to ask my board colleagues to consider that we request some sort of a study of the salary comparisons of our paraeducators and within the schools, similar school districts, and also do some sort of a study about who our successful paraeducators are, who have stayed for a long time, and why they stay. This seems to me to be a really good next step, rather than using an outside contracted firm, is to figure out what we're doing wrong so that we can eventually have those all be district employees. That would be my request of the board.
Dr. Wagner?
We certainly have already begun doing some of that. And yes, we have the same desire, and that is to fill all of our positions with our own employees. So yes.
I know an upcoming agenda item will be on special education, so perhaps this could be an element, is to talk about retention.
That is part of the
Imagine that would
plan.
be the thrust
Yes.
of it anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from my fellow board members? All right, do we have an action? A motion?
So moved?
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to F4, approval of the use of site funding for the installation of the Twin Palms sand volleyball courts at Dos Pueblos High School. Mr. Vizzolini.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Matsuoka. I put this on as an action item because the fundraising for this was actually approved by a previous board, so I don't think there's anybody up here that knows about this. Back in 2015, the local volleyball community suffered a tragic loss of a student. And because of that, the group got together and they decided to try to build and fundraise for some sand volleyball courts at Dos Pueblos called the Twin Palms beach volleyball courts. During that time, there was quite a bit of competition at Dos Pueblos for fundraising dollars. There was the engineering academy, and there was a pool, and there was lots of things, and they struggled. So in 2018, they came back, and the board approved an extension of time for them to fundraise. Since that time, we've worked together with them to try and cut down on some of their costs because their original location had many challenges for ADA accessibility, so the cost of the beach volleyball courts was mainly site work, ADA ramps and handrails and all those things. So we worked with the site administration and the volleyball group, and we picked a different spot. So this is a very old picture, so if your references are goofy, I apologize. But inside this rectangle is where we are proposing to put the courts now. So this is the football field, and the section that you see is the former area where the long jump and the shot put and the pole vault and some other track and field events were taking place. With the new stadium and track, those events have been brought onto the field and onto the track itself, so that section is no longer being used. It's ADA compliant because we have a path of travel up to the field already. It's enclosed with a fence, it's got drainage, and it doesn't need any flat work. So we were able to come up with a solution that really made a difference for them. The good news is that they are successful. So they've earned, they've raised enough money and they're ready to go to construction. So this item is asking for the board to approve site funding for the use of this, to build this complex. So we'll use facilities personnel will administer the contract to make sure that it's done properly, and we'll have it inspected. We've had an engineer review what they want to do to make sure that it's appropriate for the area and it will drain. And I think it'll be a very positive outcome, and it's a great place for it. It's right up there in the stadium with all of the other events. So we're asking for your approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Well, I just thank you. If you could just talk about the community support, because I think I read it was quite significant.
Yeah, it really ramped up in the last 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a whole lot of information about the actual donors, but I know that there's been some of the community, I believe the city of Goleta has put in some money for this. There's some fundraising groups that are volleyball related.
Great.
There's quite a bit. I know that they reached out to the Stanford volleyball community.
Wonderful.
So it was really a big outreach, and it really reached a crescendo probably about 2 months ago.
Wonderful. Well, it's wonderful to see this moving along. All right. Do we have a motion on the table?
So moved.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving to our last item on our action agenda, item F5, the approval of the 2018-19 fiscal year unaudited actuals. Ms. Jate.
Thank you. Good evening, board. So this is 18-19 unaudited actuals. These are basically our financial reports for the year end. But I want to start out by saying this young man that's on our cover is the class of 2032. He's a TKer. He just happens to be my great nephew also, but. So these are our unaudited actuals, which means they have not been fully vetted through our auditor yet, which you'll see that report in January. But these are basically how we ended the year in 18-19. So we're going to start on page 2, and this is about our executive summary. So we ended the year with $14 million ending fund balance. And this includes a district transfer of $2 million to our special reserve fund, Fund 17. And it also it had a contribution of 1.5 to our irrevocable trust, which is a really good accomplishment because it cuts down our liability. So we projected a almost $4 million deficit, and we ended up with a $7.6 million deficit. And most of that is because of we budget as if everyone's going to spend all of their funds, and that doesn't necessarily happen. We have also savings on this special ed side, which also affects the general fund unrestricted side. So those are all good things that happen that people don't need to spend as much as we budget, and that's a good thing. So, but I do want to talk a little bit about food service. Part of the $7.6 million in deficit, $600,000, we did donate to or contribute to Fund 13, which is the food service. And I want to go through some of the things that happened during this time. Can you hear me okay, or do you want me to shut the door? Okay. So what happened? Well, we had in 17-18, we had 5 schools get rebenched. So what is rebenching? So a lot of our schools are Provision 2 schools, which they go and they eat for free. They don't have to punch in their ID number. Meals are served quickly. The kids can go talk to their friends, play on the playground, whatever. It gets them through the line faster. But if there's any kind of discrepancy with not discrepancy, but any change in the SED, which is a socially economic disadvantaged, the federal government makes you do another rebenching. And what that does is they make all the kids go through and put their ID numbers in so that they can then see if you're still within the statistical area where you need to be for being a provision to school. With that being said, most of the money that was lost in 17-18 was due to an elementary. 5 of our elementaries were rebenched, and that ended up being about $315,000. And it was mostly in breakfasts. The kids ate the lunches, and there's no change in lunches, but the breakfasts were reduced quite a bit. The next year in 18-19, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the SED and the change in that, and to try to understand, if you could explain that a little more, because it was my understanding. So basically, they have to fill out. Well, maybe you could explain that just a little bit more, please.
Well, it's done. It could be in a census where your local census is taken, that people are identified that way. If the number of meals drop, they want to know why the number of meals dropped. In the case of when they serve everyone at one time, they do a bulk deposit of the meal. So like we made enough food to serve 600 kids, 558, and so they put that on the form and they send it into the government. So if they see any kind of variance like that of 5%, it triggers the rebenching. And this happens all the time. When I first got here, it was La Cumbre and Franklin, and they just do it. A lot of times they just do it in a year, the number of years later, 3 years later or so. I'm not exactly sure what everything that triggers a rebenching, but I know that it is the 5% difference there.
Because it was my understanding, and I remember when we came on the board actually with Ms. Capps, that was a big push to try to get all of the schools to ensure that the paperwork was done so that this wouldn't happen. So I was just trying to understand, is this relational to the paperwork that the parents need to fill out?
Well, that's a free and reduced meal plan that you're talking about, the
Okay.
free and reduced. Now, we want everyone to fill out that form for sure. And that's another way that they do the variance. But they also do a census of the community. So there's several things that play into that. And if they see any kind of variance, that happens. Have the meal paperwork come in differently. I don't know the answer to that. If less people are filling out that form, I am not 100% sure about that.
Okay, so this is something that happens. I don't remember hearing about rebenching before, that's all. I mean, maybe you had mentioned it, but it seems like it's such a punitive measure. Is there ways that we can, counteract that?
Well, during my research into food service, that will be something that I will look into, because we're going in pretty in depth, and I'll admit it's a learning curve for myself also. And you'll be hearing a lot more about food service as we go down this path and what we find.
Is there currently rebenching happening, or that was for last year?
18-19, we had 7.
Yes.
We had 3 high schools and 4 elementaries. For 19-20, we have La Cuesta.
Okay.
So there's only 1.
So I guess that'll be interesting to uncover that information as to why we had such an extreme the year before, and at least it's good to hear that we just have 1, but I guess just what that process we might do to ensure that we don't have a larger group rebenched.
Right. We have to figure out, I have to be more knowledgeable about why what's transpiring that 5% variance. And I'll report back on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so we're stopping you here with some more questions.
That's
Ms.
okay.
Ford.
I just wanted to also let you know that I'm really happy that you're going to look deeply into this, because for me, this paragraph actually reads as if we have no control over this situation. And I feel like there must be something we can do, so I appreciate your willingness to really dig deep and find this out. This is to me, this is it shouldn't be happening. There shouldn't be rebenching. So thank you.
Surely. So that will be one thing that I'll bring back for sure about this. Also, we've had, the problem with in food service, and everybody comes across this and has a cafeteria fund in their district, is that we are governed by the federal government. We get reimbursed X amount of dollars, cents for each meal. So we can't just increase the reimbursement rate. We can't increase the cost of a meal. We can for the adults, and we have, but we can't go and say, okay, we're going to charge every kid $7. We just can't do that. So we get reimbursed first, and we're governed by that. So you can't just, like a manufacturing company will just increase the sale of his product so that they make a profit and cover costs and salaries. And with us, our salaries and benefits would go up. We have step and column, which is the way people move on the salary schedule. We also have given, increases over the years. And we also have PERS, which a lot of companies don't have PERS, which is a huge expense and continues to be an expense for all districts. We also cook from scratch. When you cook from scratch, it takes more people. We also have a lot of organic foods. These are all great things, but we have to look at them and say, okay, what can we do to keep us scratch cooking and organically as possible, but still make a break even and not pull on the general fund. So what have we done so far to work on this? So I have moved the food service accounting tech out to North Campus, which is on the La Colina campus, and she reports to me directly now. We've done a full analysis, and we're refining that analysis of every kitchen, every program, and every kitchen that runs these programs, and everybody who is in each one of these kitchens. And we're looking to see how many meals they serve, how long they're on each one of these meals. And I can work with these numbers all day long, but then I have to rely on Ms. Weiss, the Director of Food Service, to say, okay, if we alter this at all, what does that do to our program? So we're working together on that, and her whole team. We've had 2 resignations from food service this year, so that's going to help the bottom line. We're also in process of monitoring every POS. We are going to do weekly inventories, and we are going to do daily sales reports so we keep up and see what's going on and how we're running on each one of these programs and which kitchens are doing well. We meet weekly, and we have been meeting weekly for a long time now, probably since January. And then we also have a full year of where Nancy runs a program up north we call it North County, and she feeds Head Start and some seniors up there. And that seems to be a very profitable undertaking right now. And so we call it a vended or a catering type of situation. So that's going to be helpful, and she started that back in right around February. So I think our full month was March. So we had a short year, and this year we're planning to have entirely the whole year. So that should bring in some more income. So we continue to look at this. We continue to meet every week, and I meet with the accounting tech probably, a good twice a week. And I'm just trying to refine these kitchens and these programs, because in the beginning of the year we had a lot of shuffling of employees to go to different places. So I just want everything settled and really look at some good numbers. And I need a good month of how we're doing monthly on meals in each kitchen. So we can determine if we're overstaffed, understaffed, what's going on, and which kitchens need help, and We also have 8 mobile cafes that I'm reviewing, and where are they at all times, and how many people run in those mobile cafes. She's got a big program, so it's going to take a little time to get going, but we are already starting to work on the positive fund balance next year.
Thank you. I think we have some questions just on food service, so if you don't mind pausing before we move on. Is that all right?
Sure.
Some questions? Dr. Reed?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for making the efforts to diligently dig deep and analyze the situation, which is necessary. I just did have a question about, you say 2 staff resignations. I just wondered, was that planned? I mean, did you know about that? And then you say possibly 4 more positions. So are those 4 more people that want to resign?
No, we were just looking at possibly some probationary people that we had on staff. Okay. But as I said, I want to look at the whole staff as one unit, not only by kitchen, not only by program, but as one unit, and work with HR and Nancy and see what's available to do.
So essentially, you're going to do a comprehensive approach looking at all of these areas, and you're going to be coming back with what you have uncovered in this analysis.
Yes.
And is there a time frame when you're going to be bringing that forward?
Sooner the better.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm hoping that September, when we have a really good meal count, we'll do that final one sweep over, and then we should be able to make some decisions.
Thank you.
Other questions on this? Yeah, Ms. Ford.
Thanks. A little history. Have we typically taken from the general fund to?
Never, I've been here since 2008. This is the first contribution the district has had to make.
Okay, and I also really appreciate your willingness to dig in. Clearly, there are reasons that are out of our control, reasons that are in our control, possibly poor planning, but do you have a sort of an idea of what you'd like to get to for 1920?
If I could get no deficit,
you're goal-oriented.
I'm hoping for a no deficit. If we could remain flat funded, I would be happy. If we came in over, a positive, a surplus, that would be even better. So yeah, I'm aiming for a surplus, but I'd take a no deficit.
Even.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So just keeping the questions on food service, and then we'll let you continue.
Okay.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the focus on this rebenching, because it just seems so detrimental, both fiscally, but then to read that, we lost 300,000 meals. Breakfasts and lunches and what that means for kids. It's frustrating. I know you're frustrated. I don't need to tell you that, but to sort of internalize what that has meant to our budget, but also what that has meant. And I just hear at home, I didn't have time to eat. Like, that's a constant thing when my son comes home and he's famished at 2:40. So I just wonder, like with the food service program, and I know it's a federal program, are there any fixes? Are there any flagging that you can do, or involving our representative in Congress, just to say, this is a bureaucratic problem. They need to verify, which I understand, but it's causing a loss of revenue and it's causing a loss of nutrition.
I agree with that, and I think Nancy would agree with that also. One thing that I know some of the sites are doing, especially for the elementary kids, they're letting them go to recess first. And because every little kid just wants to get out and play on the playground. They've been sitting in a chair all day. They want to go on the playground. And if they have to eat first, it's and then it's a grab and go, and they take off. And so they don't eat a full lunch. If we could promote more that we go for recess first and then lunch, I think that we would have kids eating more and eating more food and less waste. I think that in elementary there's probably a lot of waste, not because the kids aren't hungry. It's maybe a timing issue about when they eat.
No, I agree with you. I've been espousing recess first, and I know it's oddly controversial, but it is. But I'm more meant in terms of your liaison with the food service, the federal food service program. Is there a way to sort of flag that this has been a problem? Maybe that's an ongoing conversation, or is there a way to highlight the fact that this rebenching is having these kind of
Yeah,
ramifications.
we
So
can
that
look
they're-
into that. It's a really good idea that we should, start looking at ways that we can influence that.
Because I know that it's run through the Department of Agriculture.
Mhm.
So maybe again, I'm not adding more to your plate. It just, whenever I see a government problem, I want to try to find a solution. And this one is such an obvious one that if you're doing this in order to verify your numbers, you're actually harming and sending us in the wrong direction, the wrong goal of the entire program.
Right. I agree.
Well, if there's anything I can do to help on that front,
I
I'd be happy
appreciate
to.
that. We'll check it out.
So are there any other questions on food service? Just to reiterate, because I know expansion in the north, I know that's something you're looking into, but that's been so far a money generator, or a revenue generator. Is that
That's
accurate?
correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so then if we can move on to the rest of your presentation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So looking at the local economy, we made it through another year without a major catastrophe in Santa Barbara, so that's a really good thing for our community. The governor did add to his 1920 budget that he would give us back some of the property taxes we lost on the Thomas debris flow. And the Thomas fire, we still have not received any funding for that, but it is in his budget, so that's about $736,000 that we should expect, but it is one time, it's not ongoing. The state economy looks good. All the indicators are there for a healthy state, and the revenues are coming in higher than was projected, so that's really good news. Also, the big three revenue sources are also outperforming the state estimates. The federal government, we, as you know or may not know, that an adopted budget, we reduce our federal funding allocation to our sites and our departments by 10% because we just never know what the federal government is going to do, and so we have to prep this budget without knowing all the information. So we reduce our federal funding by 10%. Well, now we have the allocation, and we only had to reduce it by, it came in 2% lower. Usually what we do, sorry, I back up, is for interim, it usually says, wow, you get your 10% back, but it didn't happen that way. We came in about 2% short. So, but those allocations have been redone and they're back out at the sites. So it was a good thing we did 10% because it only came back as 8%. If you go to page 4, you'll see in this presentation that we're doing lots of graphs and supported by numbers. And this is our unrestricted and restricted revenue. And as you can see, our LCFF funding sources are the highest. They're 76% of our budget. This is our property taxes and some money from the state. Can I just do this, Brian?
Yes, it'll be moving, yeah.
Which one? Okay. I missed one. There we go. So these are the restricted and unrestricted expenditures. And as you can see, that salaries and benefits are 79%. Now, you've heard us say we've talked about 81, 82% on our salaries and benefits. Well, this is unrestricted and restricted. So therefore, there's some grants on the restricted side of the budget that don't have people in them. So that kind of skews the numbers a little bit. But when we get to the unrestricted, you'll see that we are back up to 81%. And these are the numbers that just back it up. We got in a little more money than we anticipated. We have $1 million more. 467 of that was supplemental income that, because we were declared basic aid, we weren't supposed to get. But the county said they'll give it to us anyway, so we took it. The federal government, that's MA money. That is back from 15, 16, and 16, 17 MA money. We do not book that until it's actually in the bank account in the bank. So that was an increase of $150,000, and then a slight increase in state revenue. So here we are on the unrestricted expenditures, and you see that we're back up to 81% of salaries and benefits. And our next largest expenditure is our services and other operating expenditures. Mr. Matsuoka asked us to do this a little while ago, and we thought this is a great chart to put into the unaudited actuals. This is, so what makes up all our salaries and benefits? So as you can see, the darker bar up on the front, on the top, which is 23%, that's our benefits. The green bar of 8% is our management. Classified as 17%, that's the greenish bar. And as you all probably would know that 52% of the funds are on certificated employees. So this is of our operating expenditures, our services and operations. This is what we spend our funds on. So you can see our biggest one is 58%, which is professional consulting services. So these are all our contracted services. Stop me, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Ms. Ford.
Thanks. First, a question about services and operations. I was just wondering, I really like all the graphs too, but can you direct me to where the actual dollar amounts are?
Sure.
For example, I'd like to know travel and conferences.
Page 37 on the SACS report, or 31?
It's actually 37.
Okay, so page 37 of the SACS report has services, which go down, Brian, because it's the 5,000s. So there you go, right there. So you'll see travel. I can't read this. The travel's up the top of 5,200. So you can, I can't see the top of that. What was your question about travel?
How much was it?
It's in line 52.
I can't read it.
Oh, sorry. It's 455,000 in unrestricted, and I can't read it very well from this angle.
Total of 853,000.
For travel and conferences?
Yeah. That's what's budgeted. I mean, that's what's actually happened, and $1,000,007 is $1,007 is what is budgeted, $1,070 for next year.
So last year was 853,000. Budgeted for the current school year is 1.07 million.
Is that consistent? Is that number consistent with previous years?
I don't have that with me, but I do have that available. I mean, it's in one of my documents, so I can send that to you, but I don't know that right now. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Thank you. I mean, I share the concern behind the question, I believe, is that generally when you're in a deficit, that's the first thing you look at, as much as these are important. But it might be a good place to look.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Any other questions at this section? I did. I mean, actually, I can wait till the end if you want to continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next graph is where of those professional development or the professional consulting services. This is what makes that number up. So the contracted service you see on the far side, that's like $7.8 million. 3 of that is transportation. We have home to school and special ed, and that's all lies on the unrestricted side of the budget. So that's $3 million of the 7.8. And then we have other related services such as like family services and other related types of services in that one. And our network providers are in there, and our officer for San Marcos is in there. So there are things like that that are in there. Those are our top ones. And then there are just a bunch of little services provided.
Can you explain why supplemental retirement is here and not in benefits?
That was our contribution to our irrevocable trust.
Okay.
You know, and I'm going to go back to something because I skipped over something that was pretty important and I want to point out. Oh, it's on the restricted side. It's the PERS thing. Okay. I haven't gotten to it, so sorry. I was thinking it was on the unrestricted. Okay. So now we're on that. These are the numbers that back this up. So you can see that our services and operations right here, and we underspent 1.8 million, so that's good. And our contribution was down by 684,000. So those are good. Those are good things that, you know, money wasn't just, you know, people aren't just spending it because it's in their budget. And then the contribution to the special ed going down is a good thing also. Okay, those are just some of the explanations for the differences, the variances. So now we are components of the unrestricted ending fund balance. Sorry, I lost my spot on here. Okay. So as you can see, we ended the last year in 17-18 with a $22 million ending fund balance. And the results of our 18-19 is a deficit of 7.6 million, which leaves us with an ending fund balance of $14.3 million. This is good because it then trickles into our next year, because we were anticipating a $10 million deficit, but with the increase of revenue and the decrease of expenditures that we anticipated, we ended the year much better than we thought we were going to end, which is a good thing. Any questions on that? Okay. We still have one-time funds in mandated money. These will be spent in 1920 for sure. 800 of it is already done for the iPad lease, and then the other $1 million is projected to be spent also. Okay, this just has the written explanation of what I just spoke about. Brian, can you get it on the screen a little better? So here we are on the restricted side of the budget. And this is what I wanted to talk about. This number right here, $3.6 million. We didn't actually get that revenue in. So right before we closed the books, we got an alert from Sacramento that says you need to book your state on behalf of PERS. I'm not sure any of you were on the board when the state on behalf of STRS came into play, but basically what we have to do is we get a calculation that says your part of PERS at the state level needs to be recorded on your books. So what we did with STRS is they told us what it was, and it goes up every year, but I remember 5.6. So we add revenue, and then we add an expense. So it doesn't have any effect on the budget, but it does increase our expenditures. Well, they just told us to do this with PERS, and so that's why you see a huge jump in other state revenue, because we had to do a PERS state on behalf of PERS documentation into our books. So you'll see a somewhat equivalent expenditure once we get to the restricted side of the budget. It's a net effect of zero. So whatever we put into revenue, we add a state contribution also, or a documentation of the expense. So here's the restricted side of the budget. Again, our salaries are the top expenditure. 11% is, again, our second biggest, and that's services and other operating expenditures. Again, certificated employees make up the 46%, and you notice that it's a little less on the restricted side, but our classified is higher. And this is due mostly to the paraeducators and also any kind of On the restricted side, in Title I, the sites bring in extra help, and they're usually classified. So again, our professional consulting services is the highest expenditure in our services and operations. Also in this, and on their unrestricted side, is utilities. I forgot to mention that, but that's another reason why they're so high on the unrestricted side. And there you are with the contracted services. It's our main expense. And then here is, you'll see in salaries and benefits, that 3.7, that's the PERS amount on behalf of the state, and that's why that's there. And then you can see, so we went up in our expenditures in the restricted side, but it wasn't in special ed, so these were. Okay, so the ending fund balance here for the restricted side of the budget is 3.6 million. And can you bring it up? There we go. So here's our ending fund balance on the restricted side of the budget. So we wanted to show the special reserve is on the blue, the lighter blue, and the unrestricted is in orange. And as you expect, if we are deficit spending, we're eating away at our ending fund balance in 1920 and in 2021, and projected out to 2022. But it looks better now because we did well this year. We didn't deficit as much, so that's a good thing. Any questions on that? Nope. Brian? So here's another reason why the ending fund balance turned out, the deficit was less, is that, as I mentioned, that not all the budget was spent, which is okay with us. If you could scroll down for the ADA, this is what we actually ended up with in 1819. We were 13,475 enrolled, and our ending P2 was 12,652. So our percentage is about almost 84 or 94%. But you can see also that we are continuing to decline. Budget projections, I still see a decline coming, and we continue. But as we do go into basic aid, this is good. We just have to assure that we're properly staffed for the decline. Okay.
Any questions right now?
Actually, I just wanted to know if there was any, when you went through all of this, all the numbers, did something surprise you at all? I mean, was there something that came up that you want to flag us on?
No, because usually we always come out a little better every year. I was surprised about the additional revenue that we got, because we should not have gotten supplemental. I wasn't surprised that we ended our services less. That's a typical thing that we do. We usually end up with a little more in supplies, but I think people are getting better at budgeting, and they're doing a better job of spending their money and keeping their needs supplied. So, well, the PERS reduction, I mean, the on behalf was, I mean, really, we were ready to shut no more journal entries, and this came over an email, and that was a shock. I'm surprised they didn't do it when they did the STRS. But that does increase our 3% reserve, because it is an expense. So, and it's calculated on both the restricted and the unrestricted side of the budget.
So your surprises were actually positive.
Yeah, but they weren't really surprises, because that's very typical. It's just a happy,
Okay.
I'm glad everybody didn't spend their money. So the next one is I think is one of the most important slides in this presentation. And of the deficit spending that we are doing, I really want to point out that some of this is good. We took $2 million and put it into our Fund 17. So that's like taking, money out of your operating account and putting it into your savings account. So that's a good thing. The irrevocable trust contribution out of the general fund was the $573,000, and that's good. The other amount of it that came out was from another fund. So that's why you don't see, I mentioned in the beginning it was 1.5. Well, this is the only amount that came out of the general fund. And then we did spend $2.6 million in one-time funds. And this was iPads because we wouldn't have spent this much money in 1 year, except that the auditors said you're not accounting for this properly. You need to make both of these leases in this year to catch up, and we did. So that was, that was one-time funds, but it was almost like a double. But it still was in the amount that we had received in one time, so the money was there. And then there's another one-time mandated money and all other funds of 1.4. So, I talk a lot about structural deficit, and I talk, and I thought we would come in at about $4.5 million in a structural deficit. And what I believe is structural now is the $1 million. But as you can see, which is a really good thing. But when you go over to 2019, we're still projecting a 10.4, and there will be some changes, some big changes in that number when we get to first interim in December. But we're not going to make that special reserve contribution, and we're planning on doing $1 million irrevocable trust, which could be changed if the board so pleases. And then the one-time mandated funds, we're projecting that we will have a little bit, but I'm not sure about that. So you could look at 1920 and say, wow, it looks like a structural deficit of 7.6, but every year we don't spend all our money. So if you took off what we did this year, it's about a $3 million. So we could be down to 4.6 as a structural deficit. But I want to point out that our fiscal division and the superintendent meet twice a month. And then cabinet and the cabinet all meet every first and third Friday for 2 hours. And that's all we discuss is budget. So we are working on this. We all understand the issues that we have or what we have to deal with, and we're working on them. One thing that's not in this budget, which we did not know 100% was going to come down, is we're going to get preschool money. I found out today, I thought that was ongoing. I found out today it's one time. But I think that there's legislation out there. You guys have been helping me send legislation letters up to everyone in Sacramento saying we need to fund special ed. So the preschool special ed, they're giving us one-time funds, and the latest number is $8,975, and they base it on our unduplicated pupil count as of December 1, which was 81. So that's going to get us about 727,000 instead of the 900. But another thing Newsom did is he also equalized funding for special ed. Some districts got more than other districts. And so he equalized that. So that'll put another $400,000 for special ed too, which has an impact on us because we contribute funds over there every year. So those are all good things that will happen as a first interim. And now if there are not any questions, we can go to the multi-year.
Well, I'm not sure. I do want to hear a little bit more, I think along the lines of Dr. Reed's question about surprises. I mean, you dove into the food services, but I mean, that's only several $100,000, and I'm not minimizing it, of a $7 million deficit. Where are the other, where else did we overspend, or things changed, or conditions changed, and what's the plan, or can we talk about a plan going forward?
Well, right now we're accumulating data for cabinet. I don't want to retain, they don't want me to retain all this information. I've got it. We're looking at everything. We have every time we meet with Mr. Matsuoka, he gives us, I want to see this, I want to see this, and then we make it look good and we present it to cabinet. Not make it look, it's not just data is what I'm saying. We make it look, it's more understandable, accessible, easier to read. And so we're working on that also. So we're looking at everything and we'll get it done.
Along the lines of the question about travel, I did want you to explain, please, on restricted travel versus, travel that comes out of the restricted budget versus travel that comes out of the unrestricted.
Sure. Those funds on the restricted side are from many different areas. They're from titles, the federal government. They're in CTIG. There's the educator effectiveness, which is for the classified staff, correct? Why don't you come up? She's got more of the.
So we received.
This is Lacey Preston, the Director of Fiscal.
We received various grants this year from the state, and that's all on the restricted side. So there's a professional development grant for classified that you could spend out of travel and conference, and then educator effectiveness, which also could be spent on travel. So it's a lot of more of the grant money, and then I think there's a specific funding source from the federal government that is also just for professional development, which then could attribute to travel and conference.
Thank you, that's helpful. So of the 800-something thousand the number that you looked up previously, was that related to unrestricted budget?
That was both.
That was both.
That was both together.
But the majority of that budget is taken from unrestricted, because this is just 7%.
Well, this was
of a $3 million.
It's $455,000 out of unrestricted and $397 out of restricted.
Okay. But that's due to go up next year to 1.1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Is that something that can be looked at?
Sure, that could be looked at. But if it's coming out of something like supplemental, where they're educating, they're traveling somewhere to get information, that's on the unrestricted. So that's what they are funding the supplemental money is paying for that. So to cut that, something else would just have to replace it if it was travel. You see what I mean? Because they have a specific amount that they should spend every year. And so if they spend $100,000 on travel out of supplemental, if they don't spend that, they'll just spend that on something else. You see what I mean?
No.
Okay, so supplemental gets about 11 million out of our LCFF funding, and that's where the LCAP, you get that information about the LCAP. So let's say, and it's on that lives on the unrestricted side of the budget, right? So if they had $100,000 for travel in LCAP funding, supplemental, and they decided not to, we said cut all travel, they would have to spend that $100,000 on something else. So yeah, you cut it out of travel went down, but supplies would go up, or contracted services would go up. Something else would go up because they need to spend that specific money.
But then the supply budget would go down.
No, the supply budget would go up if they took it out of travel and put it into supplies.
Right, but you're then spending less that you would have been spending on supplies from the unrestricted.
But anyway. I think my explanation is more of is like a restricted fund in the unrestricted side. I'm not, yes, we'll look at travel.
Thank you. Any questions before we move to the multi-year?
When you're looking at travel, I guess it's reflective of the professional development that is taking place. So it's good to understand that the travel is associated with professional development that the district is allocated to support our educators.
Absolutely.
So, and so I guess maybe we need to look at it as a connector here, not as just travel, but the purpose behind the travel is to provide this professional development. So I don't know, maybe it's a bigger picture to just see what was utilized, what was the travel necessary for, what professional development did it support? Because I
Okay.
think it's good understanding of the work that's being done to support our educators and their teaching profession.
Any other questions before we move on? So multi-year.
I'm going to turn that over to Lacey.
Well, actually, you can.
Actually, let me pass this out to the board, and we can pass these all the way around cabinet, and we're going to attach this to the agenda item. So this is what I call the analysis of the multi-year projections over time. And I've been presenting this to the board every time we do a major financial report. And the purpose of this is each of these, like today's unaudited actuals, December you'll get first interim, last June you adopted a budget, so you see a snapshot. Question is, what is the story that's going on? And to answer some of your questions, like what surprises, what trends, this I think you'll find helpful. So if you look at the first page, and I need to kind of remind the audience how this is organized. All right, so this was 2016-17. All right, so this was my first year in the district. What I did is I punched in the data from the adopted budget of, that would have been June 2016. That was actually before I was the superintendent. That was an interesting board meeting. I was here, and I watched lots of discussion, and it was not a unanimous vote in favor of the adopted budget. First time I'd ever seen that. I'm going, what am I stepping into? And I did learn the story behind it. I'll just point out the structural deficit that was set up in that budget was about $4 million. All right, so you look at total revenue, line 5, total expenditures, so it's a difference of about $4 million. And then what I did is I just captured this data really about every 3 to 4 months, like how is it changing? And so if you look, I pay attention to line 8 and line 9. Line 9, total ending balance, we want it to grow, and it did. In fact, it grew at a really healthy rate at the end of the year. And if you look at the total reserves at the bottom, we started the year projected at 4.69%. We ended at 17.36%. So what was going on that year? We had a governor named Jerry Brown. And Jerry Brown loved one-time money, and he loved to dish it out at certain times of the fiscal year. And there were probably other things that were going on, but I think the big influence of that era was we had a governor who loved the tool of one-time funds. And so the next year, the blue year, is 17-18, and Brian, if you'll scroll down just a touch, look at the same trend, bottom line. We started the year with a projected ending balance of 8.8% reserves, and we finished the year at 19.19%. What were the influences in that year? Again, Jerry Brown doing one-time money. Meg, that was the first year we were basic aid because of the sale of redevelopment agency property, and we got some one-time money. So it was one-time money locally and one-time money at the state level. So we finished that year really well, okay? All right, so now, and you'll have to flip the page. So this is now the completed look at last year. So these are 5 snapshots. So we started the year at a total reserve projected at 9.8%, and we finished at 14.65%. All right, so here's what I'm going to say to you as your superintendent, and that's why we're studying the budget. There's a shift going on. I liked it when we went up and finished, I like it when we finished at 19% reserves. I like it when our cash balance is $25 million. Well, our cash balance now is $18 million. It's good, but that's a big difference from $25 million. So what's going on? Well, this is let's see, we've had Governor Gavin Newsom for 8 months, because he won the election November 2018, and so now he's got a different philosophy. So far, in general, I like what he's doing, but he's not doing the one-time monies like Jerry Brown does. But Gavin Newsom does have an interest in preschool and special ed. And so that boost in special ed money was helpful, but it wasn't as big as the one-time money that Jerry Brown was giving us. The other difference is in the green. Let's see, we went out of basic aid and we went back to what's called LCFF. This year we're back in basic aid, and the big data point that we're waiting on from the county tax assessors is how's property values doing. All right, we're hoping higher than 4%. I think we're going to come in higher than 4%. I'm hoping for a bigger number, but we just have to wait and see. We'll know in about a month. So in answer to some of the, I wouldn't call it surprises, but watching for shifts in what's going on, I think there is a shift, and that income is slowed down, and then we have to be more careful. All right, so we have to start looking at our budget. The structural budget numbers, it's been there for the last 2 years, but what changed is the one-time money that came in. And so it sort of masks over our deficit spending. The deficit is not 10 million, but it's a real number, and just know that your cabinet team we spend twice a month just trying to make sense of it. Where can we save money? The big thing that we're looking at is, as enrollment drops, we need to keep our staffing in line with the right number of kids. So we're already starting to plan for staffing for next year. So those are the big picture observations that I see. Again, I think it takes probably a year and a half of watching a governor lead the state economy. He's fortunate to have inherited a healthy economy. So we'll see probably in the next cycle. All right, questions, comments?
No.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to look to my right here. Any questions from my colleagues?
No. I just wanted to make a comment that I've appreciated this picture that you provide, these snapshots, because I think it does help us see trends and understand, the challenges, but, the upswing and downswings of the budget process. So thank you for bringing that forward. And so you're saying in a month is when we're going to have sort of a
yeah, we should get tax assessor info October 1st. We will not wait until first interim, because that's December. I think we'll bring just an update about county assessor data. And Meg, I'm thinking we should present the logic of reducing the contribution to the irrevocable trust. So there was a number up there. Right now we're transferring $1 million, and that's against our retiree health care expenses. We're in good shape, and we are going to recommend, we've talked about it, reducing that to $500,000 for next fiscal year. It's still responsible, still saving for the future, but we think we can back off on that a little bit, because we need some cash. We got to try to knock down the deficit. So we'll present the data and the logic of that. I think we're very comfortable with it, and then we'll have county assessor data and maybe any other good news. And we also have to present, honestly, any bad news. So things change every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, Ms. Munoz.
Yes, I was going to say, I appreciate, the explanation and making it into layman's terms. And then also, just looking at it, knowing how much the cabinet looks at it, how often, and then having it a good visual and explanation. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
To everyone.
Yeah, thank you. This does help, because it does show just how our expenditures are jumping up. And starting in 2016, 148 million, and now projected,
176.
176. That's a significant trend, and that's an important one to be mindful of. And I guess that's underlying what you're trying to do, but that is quite significant.
Related to the travel and conferences, I did write that down, that we should take a look at it. It went up to $1 million. But here's what I've wrestled with for 20 years. That's about 0.6% of our total budget. And that's the investment in our human capital, our people. In some ways, I call it the research and development budget of an organization. And I've always been really frustrated that we don't even get to 1% of our budget spent on our human resources. And I wish we had more money. I really do. We have to be careful with it. I think Sean and Raul would testify that the payoff that we're seeing with all of the PD that's happened over the last 2 to 3 years, it's starting to show up, and it will continue. I hope we can continue that investment, but we also have to present to you an appropriate budget.
Yeah, Dr. Reed.
I just wanted to speak to that because I know over the last few years that has been brought forward, the need for professional development, for the new, trends, and also the work that needed to be done. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so I do think it would be great to see what that was, because I believe, just to maybe remind me of what it was that we did approve, for the purpose of this education and professional development that our teachers needed. So it might just be a memory lapse in my part of what all that was, but I truly agree. I believe it's really important. That's why we're here, is to support our educators, to support our students, and ensure that our students are getting what they need to achieve at their highest level. So.
Yes, agreed. And I just would want to add, the reason for my questions on that is I would feel more comfortable voting for these numbers if there were more examples other than, we dove into food service justifiably, but what are the other three? And I think I even asked this last time. What are the other three areas? And so that's in part why I just picked out travel. What are the other areas? And I know you've been meeting diligently, no questioning about the process, but I would feel more comfortable voting, knowing, okay, this is an area that we saw a 33% increase. We're going to figure out why. Or, these other 5-6 areas, of course, they all make up about 6% of the entire budget. But added together, they make up the $7 million that we're trying to get to. So that's what I'm looking for, with respect, because I know you're working. So, but I would feel, we do have a deficit. This is serious, and here we are going to vote on a budget of actual numbers. We know where we stand now, and so I don't quite have a sense of the plan, or even when the plan's coming.
The plan will be here. Sorry.
Go ahead.
The plan will be partially what we have to do is we have to have some sort of plan by first interim. The county is requiring it, which is a good thing. We had already hit that as our deadline for our plan anyway. But just remember that 81% of it is salaries.
Yeah.
And with STRS and PERS, it's huge. I mean, especially PERS, and step and column, all those every year go up, and that's, I think, one of the biggest. So it's not a surprise PERS and STRS goes up.
Sure.
It's just a huge impact. And again, we can't increase a widget cost, right? We can't increase any revenue. We don't have that ability. The only thing we have to rely on is the property tax increments. So it's not like you're in a manufacturing where you could just increase the price. And that's the struggle with districts, and a lot of districts are deficit, and they almost say if you're not deficit, that's odd if you're not deficit spending.
So just for the benefit of the public, can you, that's good to know that the county requires that plan by the first interim. What's the date for that?
It will be part of the first interim,
but just
if not before.
What's the time frame of that?
Oh, I'm sorry, December 15th.
Thank you. December 15th, great. Any other questions or comments from the board? So do we have are we ready for a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, I think with that, We are moving to our discussion agenda. Should we take a 5-minute break? Okay, let's do it. Let's resume. I don't think I used the gavel because we didn't break, but back to item G, report and discussion agenda. G1 is a report on science pilots for the Santa Barbara Unified School District's secondary students. Ms. Carey.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Capps and fellow board members. Good evening, and good evening, community and cabinet members. I'm actually really excited to bring this report forward. It's the culmination of actually lots of years of kind of waiting to be at this moment with respect to science in secondary. You're going to be hearing a lot from Dr. Ann Roundy Harder in just a moment about where we are in the process, but it is a much anticipated event. And in some ways, it's a process that we finally get to engage on in secondary that brings together some of those elements we were just talking about. When we get frameworks from the state and standards from the state, and of course with science, the accountability, the assessment comes in the form of a test called CAST. We take all of that information in, but then we get to do something local with it. We get to develop our people, we get to avail ourselves of resources in our own county and other counties, and we get to design and participate in our own processes involving various stakeholder groups so that we can discern what's the best fit suite of instructional materials for our students in the secondary grade spans. So I know that you received digital versions of these 2 flyers. They are from Next Gen Science Standards folks, we've got the Common Core State Standards for ELA and Math, and it's the Next Generation Science Standards for Science. The first one that's coming down the road to you is for grades 9-12. The second one is for grades 6-8. They also are there digitally, but they're kind of handy to have in hard copy as well. And then this item in the board agenda, you may have noticed, had a very healthy amount of background. And really, it was meant to give you a very detailed timeline and context for just the fact that we've been underway kind of studying and watching the developments in the Common Core era and in the Next Generation Science Standard era as they have emerged. And so again, we're very excited to be at this point now of embarking on our instructional materials pilot, and ultimately, hopefully, a recommendation will be coming to you in the spring for a request and approval for adoption. So here with more details is Dr. Ann Roundy Harder.
Thank you, Ms. Carey, and good evening to the board and Mr. Matsuoka and cabinet and public. So although I'm up here, I want to say first a huge debt of gratitude to Nellie Hill, who is our instructional support specialist for secondary science. Ms. Hill is just absolutely amazing in her thoughtfulness, her intelligence, and organization of all of this. So we co-created this presentation, and I just want to make sure that I give due credit to her for that. So we're going to talk just briefly about our pilot's overview and sort of why we need this new curricula for the grades we've chosen, why those grades, and so on. So as Ms. Carey mentioned, we have the California Next Generation Science Standards, and these are the standards that we need to make sure that we are adhering to for our students. And so as we look at the Next Gen Science Standards, a couple of years ago, you received a presentation that was about the standards themselves, so I won't really belabor that point, but just to say that we are responding to the call for the preferred integrated model for 6th through 8th grade. And specifically tonight, I'm going to be talking about 7th grade, 8th grade, and physics. So in the high school model, we have a new sort of 3-course model, which is physics, chemistry, and biology. Now, those courses aren't new, but what's new about them, and the reason for the need for the curricula, is that now they are embedding earth and space science standards into those curricula in this 3-year model. Now, we have a graduation requirement for 2 years of science. The state has a minimal requirement for 2 years. UC and CSU prefer 3 years, so this brings us into a strong alignment with preparing our students for whatever futures they may choose, whether that is a UC, CSU, or some other alternative, but it gives them that option. In the 7th and 8th grade model, and I'm going to be diving more into the specific curricula in a second, that is the integrated model, and so we see embedding of different practices and standards into the 7th and 8th grade that we haven't had before. The State Board of Education came out with a K through 8 recommended curriculum list in November of 2018, so fairly recently. And the curricula that we chose to pilot is from that recommended state board list. So we'll see that in a second. Ms. Carey also mentioned the CAST, the California Science Test, which just became operational last year. So this is a test that's given 3 times throughout a student's education. So it's given in 5th grade, 8th grade, and then in high school you actually have a choice. So it's sometime by the time they graduate. Well, if you've ever had a senior, you know that senioritis hits in 12th grade pretty hard in the spring. So in our district, we determined that we would place the test in 11th grade. 11th grade's a pretty heavy hit for a lot of kids too with testing, but it's not quite the same as, hey kids, here's a test, so you've already been accepted to college, but go ahead and give it your good old try in 12th grade. So we hold it in the 11th grade, and that's very common for a lot of districts to do. And we also want to make sure, as we look at new curriculum, that it's meeting college and career readiness demands for students. So it embeds critical thinking, it embeds inquiry, it looks at argument and how to construct arguments using evidence and scientific data and so forth. So all of these things were behind looking at our new curricula. So which courses are we piloting in? Well, I mentioned that we're doing 7th and 8th grade and then also high school physics. The pilots are happening already. We're starting them now in this first quarter, and we will continue into second quarter. So we have one piloted curriculum in first, another in second. We'll be doing evaluations along the way, more on that in a second. And then our hope is that we can bring forward a strong recommendation to you with lots of input from lots of stakeholders to then recommend for adoption in the next school year. Now, because we know the science standards are aligned from 6th to 8th grade, you might say, well, why isn't 6th grade also piloting at this time? There was a lot of intentionality behind choosing 7th, 8th, and 9th. For one thing, to pilot is a huge process. It's very time consuming. It involves a lot of different people and a lot of moving parts. The 6th grade, as I know you're aware, is deep into the literacy emphasis, and so they've been implementing the Lucy Calkins reading and writing workshop. They've also got some new math that they're looking at, and so it was felt that science would be just a step too far on top of those other really important rollouts. So the intention is that 6th grade will look at what 7th and 8th grade have decided to then have an aligned model. So it's kind of a funny name, but the curricula that we're piloting in 7th and 8th grades for first quarter is called Green Ninja. This is a rather new publisher. We got excited about them when we attended the publishers fairs both at Ventura County Office of Education and the Santa Barbara County Education Office. It's very new, progressive, and innovative. It involves a lot of labs and hands-on learning for the students, inquiry-based learning, and so on. And then in second quarter, we're doing Stemscopes. And Stemscopes might actually be familiar to you because that's something that we have used in the past. Stemscopes is through Accelerate Learning, and they've had kind of a reboot lately to respond to the new requirements of the integrated integrated science. And so the teachers chose that. What we did is when we went to the publishers fairs, you have workshops that you can attend by specific publishers, and then there's also sort of a general time when you can wander around to different publishers' booths and check them out. So we took a team of teachers, administrators, both at the site and the district level, to both of those experiences, and we looked at lots of different information, and then we sort of did an initial sort from there based on our initial impressions. Then we had several different curricula we looked at, and then from there we winnowed down, mostly at the teacher team level, and again with Ms. Hill's guidance, to come to these two curricula that we thought were the most worthy of being piloted. In physics, we had a slightly different scenario. So while there were quite a few that we looked at for 7th and 8th grade, it was a little bit skimpy, to be honest about it, when we looked at the physics. We didn't find as many publishers that we felt were really, truly meeting the next gen science standards. So there were some that would say, yes, we do next gen science standards, and it was basically their textbook from 15 years ago with a few extra questions. Not really inquiry-based, not really looking at critical thinking, and not really looking at integrating concepts in the same way. So what resulted from that were some deep conversations about piloting. So where we landed is with one that's textbook-based, which is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt's Physics in the Universe, also called Science Dimensions. And then, so that'll be first quarter. And then in the second quarter, we're using online educational resources. So these are resources that are available for people. You can imagine them as unit modules, and then you select from among the modules that meet your standards to create your own coursework, basically. So we call them OERs, or Open Educational Resources, Online Educational Resources. And this company, CK12, actually allows you to create your own digital textbook, essentially. And Nellie Hill went through specific training in learning how to create an OER textbook, if you will, with the text being digital text. So it's kind of exciting and progressive, because the cool thing about an OER is that you can constantly be updating it. Whereas if I grabbed a book and I'm pressing on the pages, nothing new is happening. But if I have online educational resources, the links might be new and fresh each time as new data comes in, as new information becomes available, as new articles and research are available to teachers. So it's a constantly renewing resource in that way, within guidelines, because the information is vetted through OERs. So who's piloting and how did they get ready? This is very exciting. I know it's late, but it really is exciting because we have so many teachers that have signed on to be piloting. It's almost everybody. All the 7th and 8th grade and physics teachers were, of course, invited to be part of the process. And we had 15 of our 7th and 8th grade teachers across all 4 of the junior high schools that signed on to do this. And I happened to be at Santa Barbara Junior High last night for their back to school night. And as I was walking through the classrooms, it was really wonderful. I stopped in one science teacher's room, and he was talking to the families and the students, and he said, you know, he didn't even see me because I was in the doorway, but he said, you know what I really love? He said, I love that I'm doing the same thing as my colleagues at the other schools, and we get together and we talk about our lessons, and we talk about what's working and what's not working and what we can improve. And he was just bubbling over with enthusiasm, which was a great sign to me that the piloting is effective when you have so many people doing it. We have 6 physics teachers at Dos Pueblos, Santa Barbara, and San Marcos, so all 3 of our comprehensive high schools are covered. So total, we have 21 science teachers in our district that are piloting right now, which is, as I said, the majority of them. We've had a total of 168 hours of review and training prior to even starting the piloting with students. So our teachers are well prepared for this process. And again, lots of credit to Ms. Hill for that. So the next steps will be to conclude our pilots by the end of second quarter. And we want to make sure that we're getting input from our families, our students, our teachers. So Ms. Hill and I have designated a couple of curriculum review nights in January. We've got to kind of squeak them in among the open houses. It's a busy month, as frankly all months are now. But we're putting them early in January. And we're going to have one at San Marcos, and then we're going to have one at Santa Barbara High School. But parents can go to either one of the nights, or they can come both times if they want to for the experience to look through the curriculum. And we really talked about, should we do it while the pilots are happening, or is it better towards the end? We felt that it was better towards the end, because then teachers will have a richer experience to be able to talk about the curricula having tried them out. And we'll have more information from student evaluations, from the teacher evaluations, and so forth. And then we can garner our parent and family and community input as well through those experiences. So taking all of that input in, we'll take a little while to crunch through that data, and then what we'll do is present again to you our recommendations at that time. And then ideally, we will look forward to purchasing materials for the upcoming school year. So that was kind of a breezy ride through our pilot process, but I want to see if you have any questions about it.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Ford?
As I mentioned to you earlier today, Ms. Carey, I just think this was an excellent report, and I'm so excited about the plans and also your enthusiasm, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Ms. Munoz?
I appreciate, all the teachers being involved and how you looked at all the different programs that are out there, and I look forward to learning more about it.
Yeah, thanks.
That's right. I'll join in the praise. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to our last agenda item in this section, G2, the update on California's assessment and accountability system. Ms. Carey.
Thank you. Last on the agenda, but I too am excited about this report, believe it or not. And even though it is my name here and I'm going to be doing the speaking and fielding any questions, I want to invite especially our superintendent and Brian Rouse, who are part of our data analytics team. We as Ed Services teams, but also we have interdisciplinary teams that talk a lot about the systems we use to study our district's data and to do sense making around it. And that's what tonight is about. This report is really to help equip all of us, including the entire community, with as good a grasp as we can have about this really intricately engineered accountability system, because it is really intricately engineered, and it's very meaningfully engineered, but it is not necessarily readily accessible. So you can anticipate a report at our next meeting in a couple of weeks. After the results of the spring 2019 assessment are public, you can expect that report, that is our annual custom to do so, where we bring to you how our district fared and performed on that spring assessment. And so this report is in anticipation of that. I wanted to start by just letting you know, I know we speak in a lot of acronyms in education, so just a quick overview of some of the content that we'll be going through in tonight's report. We have the California Common Core State Standards. So as next slide will show, people talk about Common Core. Those were nationally developed standards, and the state of California adopted them as the state standards for us in 2010. So those things are pretty much interchangeable. There are some adjustments that California made to the Common Core standards, but essentially it's the Common Core standards, and they are also our state standards. So if you hear standards aligned or state standards, it's the Common Core. We will be talking about our California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, and we will be talking about a concept called DOK, which we've mentioned here before, but we're going to be doing that in a lot more depth tonight in preparation again for the board report that will come in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about the assessment tool that we administer every spring, the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, which measures our students' performance and progress in English language arts, or ELA, and math. And as I alluded to really briefly earlier, the test for science, and Dr. Roundy Harder talked about too, is called CAST. And that's not taken at every grade level. It's 5th, 8th, and 11th. And so that will increasingly become part of our annual reporting. But tonight, we don't have that yet. There's still been piloted and field tested, and now we'll get some real results on that. But we're still tonight going to be talking about the things that we do have access to so far. We'll be revisiting the 5x5 grids and just deepening our understanding of that. And that includes this construct of what used to be called distance from 3, but 3 is the same thing as standard, and now the preferred terminology is distance from standard. And sometimes you hear DFS. So that's just a little, primer before we begin. Here's a timeline. I just spoke to some of these things. I really wanted to highlight, since you can read up there for yourself, the things that I touched on, but I really wanted to highlight what happened in 2015. Now, by 2015, we were we had been doing sense making around the standards for a few years. In fact, we had a 4-quarter plan in our district, and quarter 1, and it wasn't necessarily like a school year quarter, was all about getting to know the standards. And that was a heavy lift for secondary teachers, but it was an even heavier lift for elementary school teachers who had to get to know all the shifts in standards in multiple subjects simultaneously. So it may seem like a really long timeline to get to know standards, but they were radically different standards, very much increased in rigor, and it really was a heavy lift. So in 2015, we had really done a lot of sense making about them, but we were still kind of coming to understand what the assessments were going to be, and also what the new accountability system would be, and how it would be different from the model we knew. If you look up there at that top line, 1998 to 2003, personally, those were my coming up years. 2013, those were my coming up years. Those are the years that I was a teacher, and really it represents the bulk of our teacher workforce. So the bulk of our teacher workforce is really, kind of came up in the STAR era and the No Child Left Behind era. And this shift to the Common Core standards and CAS testing is a major shift, as we'll dive into. But that's why I want to highlight about this timeline. 2 more things. We really recognize that, gosh, we're not going to be able to just talk about this in a bureaucratic way alone. We need our principals and our teacher leaders and every one of our teacher teams to begin to really internalize all the interconnections between the standards and how students learning against the standards can be measured. Even though we talked in 2017 about the dashboard, do bear in mind that it was last fall we came to and said they made changes to the dashboard. So even as we got to know it and got introduced to it the first time around, Jerry Brown really asked that there be changes made to it for more accessibility. So we've been spending the better part of a decade now getting to understand this new paradigm, but it's a lasting one. As I said, it's a thoughtfully engineered one, and that's what we're going to dive into. Their CASP is spelled out. I just wanted to highlight while we're on it that there are 2 A's, there are 2 P's. Sometimes we forget, but a handy way to remember that the 2 P's are there is it really is a measure of both performance and progress. And that is different. That is a distinction from the STAR and NCLB era where you would just be rewarded for, there were ways in which you could be rewarded for progress, but they were usually very niche and narrow, and you were mostly rewarded just for performance. So in this model, I'm going to say it right at the outset and not bury the lead. As compared to the former era, which really did reward you for gaming the accountability system, and that could be a positive or negative. Sometimes you would focus on a group of students who are really on a cusp, and that's a good thing to move them up a performance band. It could also be negative because you could decide that it was more worth your while to do that as opposed to thinking about how best to serve all your students. And this model that we have with the California dashboard and with CASP really does align with educators' innate desires to best serve all students. And the better you serve all students in this model, the more rewarded you are in terms of your performance will go up and your progress will increase. And then you progress through these colors, especially on the 5x5 matrix. So students, we want students to meet standards, which again is 3, is standard. Of course, we would love them to meet and exceed, but we also pay attention to students who are nearly meeting standard and who are not meeting standard. And we're looking at all those data points. All of those overall standard ratings, 1, 2, 3, 4, are based on scaled scores that have 4 digits. You see sample ranges there. And if I can't click on that, can I? If you click on this, you'll see a glance of all the ranges for all the grades. ELA's on the top, math is on the bottom. That's a lot to take in, but if you're a parent and you're on the receiving end, as I am for the first time ever this fall, because I had a 3rd grader last year, of getting this score report, you're going to get that kind of a report. It's going to be those numbers, and they get really relevant really quickly. What we're interested in is that second to last column where it talks about standard met. And you see that left-hand number, thank you, Brian knows exactly where my head's going. So we're interested for 3rd grade in that 2432, 2473. We're interested in all of it, but we're particularly interested in what we're going to call the floor of standard met of 3, the floor of 3. Because when I talk about distance from 3 or now distance from standard, we're talking about distance from that cutoff score. And the cutoff scores shift. So again, it doesn't reward gaming or trying to reverse engineer a system. It rewards, this accountability system rewards trying to get students to standard met, even as that target shifts and moves. So we'll go back to the other. I'm going to skip over, don't be mad, this next table for a moment. And I don't like to do this, but I am going to read aloud just the DOK3 row. DOK3. DOK stands for depth of knowledge. You have some background on that in the report, accompanying report. But DOK3 requires students to think strategically and reasonably about how and why concepts, ideas, operations, and procedures can be used to attain and explain answers, conclusions, decisions, outcomes, reasons, and results, or knowledge analysis. There's even some analysis that pops up in DOK2. And you can think of DOK4 as knowledge. I like augmentation a lot. It's almost adding new knowledge to this ecosystem of knowledge that we all share, or knowledge extension is another way to think of it. So we talk a lot now about DOK3. Related constructs that you might have heard historically in education are Costa's levels of thinking. We've got other scales that measured critical thinking at different dimensions. But just to kind of explicate what it means to have something be a DO3 level task is here 2 examples of an activity looked at through a DOK 1, 2, and 3 lens. And you can kind of see the progression of what it means to be prompted to do these activities at a DOK 1 level versus a DOK 3 level. And it becomes pretty readily apparent, the distinction, the difference in complexity of those tasks. So a couple things. You see the title of this slide here saying task predicts performance. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. But if we know we want students performing at standard met, which is that standard 3, and actually we know now that most of the standard 3 performance aligns to DOK 3, then that means we need to be giving students tasks that are at DOK level 3. And some people would say, well, you have to go through all of DOK 1 and DOK 2 before you can get to DOK 3, but we are knowing and toying with how can you use DOK 3 level experiences as entry points into DOK 1 through 4 learning. So just Dr. Roundy-Hire talked about that with the OERs, and actually with the HMH pilot in physics. How can we use discovery learning, phenomenon-based learning to stimulate students' natural curiosity as a gateway to DOK 1 and 2 and 3 and beyond learning? If you go on the CDE and CASP website, you can get good samples that are beyond just these 2 examples of what it looks like to actually be in the testing mode. And so hopefully you've taken the time to do a little bit of that, and we certainly invite the community to, because it is really eye-opening and kind of challenging and fun to do. But we pulled just a couple of them so that people could get a sense of what the actual test is like. So knowing that the font is really small, there's a narrative text on the left, and the prompts on the right here ask the tester to explain information and give details to support information. Second prompt asks the tester to evaluate relevance and to justify that evaluation with supporting details. Any guesses what grade level this is? It's not 3rd, Principal Naughton. This is a junior high test. It's the beginning of an English language arts performance task. Here's a math version. I'll just give you a little bit of time to wrestle with this one. I'll make this interactive. Raise your hand if you think you could solve these 2 prompts here.
At 9 o'clock at night? No.
At 9 o'clock at night? No. Do you have enough information to answer them eventually, if you were to? persevere through them. If you go on, I did this one, I did a few of these online. If you go on, it does actually ask you to generate the equation that describes how you can continue, to predict the patterns and the right answers. Also 8th grade math test. So lots of critical thinking and math, and lots of writing in math. So just wanted to see a couple examples of that so you could see what it means to live out thinking strategically and reasonably in order to be successful on these CASP assessments. I also want to invite you to think about how this description of DOK3 aligns with our district's mission, preparing students for a world yet to be created, and instructional vision. So our district-wide instructional vision, TK12, is that students will read, reason, and communicate to contribute positively to an ever-changing world. So you've helped approve those mission and vision statements and endorse those for our district's teachers, and DOK3 aligns very nicely to those. So knowing that's what we want our students to be doing so that they can be prepared for a world yet to be created and they can read, reason, and communicate to contribute positively to that ever-changing world, that's what our tasks should be designed to have them be doing. And that's what our assessments need to measure that they are doing. So in advance, again, of the board report on student performance on 9/24, well, how much is that a part of the test? What is the nature of this CASP test? And importantly, how does it compare to this 15-year period in which we had STAR and NCLB, which again is when the majority of our workforce kind of received their training and did most of their coming up. So you'll see in the top, now I'm coming back to this slide, you'll see in the top row that when it comes to math, less than 2% of math on the STAR tests, were in a DOK3 range, and none of it was DOK4. As compared to CASP, where nearly half the items in the math CASP assessment are DOK3 and 21% are DOK4. So 70%, more than 2/3 of the items in the math test, CASP test, are DOK3 and 4, and not even 2% of them were DOK3 and 4 in STAR. If there was no other big takeaway from tonight, it would be this graphic. Because this is what represents why the 10 years. From adoption of the California Common Core state standards, sense making about the standards themselves, coming to understand how CASP works and the nature of the kinds of prompts. This really calls out sort of why it feels and is so different. And the reason I'm excited is because that is a good thing. We want to raise rigor. We needed to raise rigor. We need to be dealing with tasks that didn't leave our students functioning at DOK1 and being called successful when they did that. We need to have tasks that predict students' high performance against this DOK3 and 4 level matrix. And that is what will prepare students for a world yet to be created. We know that intuitively, and we have standards and assessment tool that match that. So ELA, same thing. It was a little less dramatic, but dramatic nonetheless. 22% of tasks on STAR in DOK ranges 3 and 4. 68%, again, nearly 70%, 2/3 of items in DOK 3 and 4 with CASP. I'm going to go to the last portion of this report, and it is about the broader accountability system. So once all our students assess in the spring assessment cycle, CASP assessment cycle, and they all get their individual score reports. We talked about the 4-digit scaled scores, and every student gets a 1, 2, 3, or 4, but based on that very granular scaled score. What happens is the CDE, this accountability, the dashboard, this accountability system averages all students. You can search by district. You can average all students in our district. You can average all students in a particular school. It can average all students within a particular student subgroup or a particular student group. And within those categories, it can tell you, well, how far is that average score from standard? How many points above or below it is that district or school or student subgroup landing in relation to the standard, that floor, remember that cutoff score. And it might be 6 points above or 22 points below, but that's where the distance from standard phrase comes in. So I'm gonna actually skip around this, I'm doing this. So here's a good illustration of if this is a 5th grade student, as you see in the diagram, and the level 3 standard met score range is there, and a student scores a 2,505, they are 23 points. Their DFS, their distance from standard, is a minus 23. That's one student's score. But you take that for all students and you find out, okay, what is the aggregate distance from standard? Once you have that information, once the CD has that information, they say, okay, here's how you performed in the y-axis, in the vertical column here. Here's how many of your students performed high or very low in an absolute sense in relation to that cutoff, that 3 marker, that threshold score we want. And here, along the x-axis, the horizontal axis, here is how that changed compared to what that average was last year. And depending on how you do, if you performed very high in an absolute way this year, and it represented an increase from last year, so we're illustrating that would land you in green. And if you look at the accountability dashboard, California dashboard for our district, you'll see that for ELA, that is where we landed. We landed in green. So we both increased, we performed more highly than we did last year, and we increased. For mathematics, it was yellow. So it was almost flat in terms of change over time from last year. And our overall performance was in a lower range than we would like, but still within yellow. That's in the report part that accompanies the slide deck. So you can, again, look at that for our district, and you can look at that for any specific school site or student subgroup. These are just these threshold cutoff scores for the grade levels for ELA or math, respectively. So the challenge will be how to keep these kinds of things, kind of in your working mind and memory as you look at how our various schools perform, how our various grade spans as cohort groups perform, and how our district as a whole performs when you look at that performance data on September 24th. And we are almost 100% confident that it will be released by then, right? So we're eager to bring that to you, but we thought we'd take advantage of the waiting time to kind of remind you and everyone about the framework, of the California assessment system. I don't know if there's anything that Carrie or Brian wants to add from our meetings, or if there are questions or comments that I can help with.
Any questions or comments? Dr. Reed.
No, I just wanted to thank you. I mean, I think we need cue cards, though, for the next meeting. But I think it just the way you rolled it out, it makes a lot of sense. And so it was good to have a refresher, certainly for me, to just sort of get an understanding. So I appreciate this sort of in advance notice that we can apply to the knowledge that we gain in a few weeks.
Ms. Ford.
Thanks. Thanks for the introduction to CASP. I'm also wondering this year, what kind of learning opportunities and support, since this has made it clear that it's very tough to do this, what's out there right now for teachers?
Yeah, the immediate answer that comes to mind is the work that is resulting from our partnership with Innovate Ed. So just last Tuesday, a week ago, I'm looking at Principal Naughton. He was here as part of a principals collaborative, and we gathered all the principals, members of our district. You've heard about schools SLTs. We actually have a district counterpart as a DLT. So we have our own group of folks. Mm-hmm. It includes John Shetler. It includes Roxana from TIP, Roxana Stern. Anybody who's associated with the instructional program, deeply associated with the instructional program, even if they're not from Ed Services, in conjunction with all our principals. And we went through a lot of this data, but at much deeper levels, and then in very grade-specific and subject-specific ways. And a major part of that time together last week was dedicated to, now what? As a principal, how do I turn around and create learning experiences for my teachers that are authentic and sometimes we say sticky, that where this can be very accessible and very actionable. And really the task of the principals is, how do I do that for my school's leadership team so that they in turn have their own capacity increased and can turn around and do that within their respective PLCs and teacher teams. So it's building capacity simultaneously across all of those layers and systems. that is the way. That is the theory of action.
Thanks. Just
Keep going.
one more. And this kind of goes back to the whole interest in conferences and travel. Tonight, we approved some travel, and I was wondering if you or Mr. Matsuoka could tell us about what you expect to see at Valor Collegiate, and also so many people participating in Districts on the Move, leading a coherent system of continuous improvement.
I'll speak to the latter, and I'll let the superintendent speak to the former question. So Districts on the Move is twice a year. There's a gathering. It's kind of a summit-style gathering. Gosh, I feel like there's about 15 districts that gather there. Some are small, some are large. And that's it's our district leadership team. That's that big group of people that you see. It includes 3 principals, an elementary, junior high, and high school principal. It is in conjunction with Dr. Michael Fullen, upon whose research all of the theory of action that I've been describing with schools' leadership teams is built. And it really, even though this doesn't come up on our slides here, it really is about creating conditions for improving collective teacher efficacy. And of course, for teachers to feel and experience and generate collective teacher efficacy, they do need to understand this accountability and assessment system. That's essential to understanding, but it's not necessarily the driver. I want to be really careful about saying pretty declaratively that we need to be values-driven, as is codified in our mission statement, instructional vision, and data-informed. That becomes particularly important for me in the secondary schools, with only in the high schools 1 grade level assessing, and a proliferation of other measures for other metrics for measuring students' college and career readiness. So I don't want to minimize CAST for anyone, high schools, and certainly not junior highs and elementary schools, but it is one way, and I think a really valuable, important, and meaningful, differently from STAR and NCLB. It's one way of measuring how our students are progressing. I think it is a valuable way. When we go to Corona Norco and you see the Districts on the Move, that's about a learning time for all of us as district leaders in conjunction with site principals and teachers. Karen McBride, who's in the audience now, is part of our DLT also. And it builds our own capacity, but it's also about exchange of ideas. So the spring version of that, which will come to you, that's in May, is really a learning fair. And it's experiential learning for us.
Valor Collegiate is in Nashville, Tennessee, and through all my other networks, I've been hearing about Valor for about 3 to 4 years, and it's really, I think, an offshoot of the personalized learning space, and they are the highest rated charter school in the state of Tennessee. And their theory of action is that we're going to build a model around social emotional learning as the foundations as we teach academics. And so I finally connected with the founder, and we're taking a small team to go out there and visit. It aligns with the MTSS framework that we presented last, I think, June, because we have to attend to both academic and social emotional learning. And so I'm not sure what we're going to see, but I know the reviews across from so many angles has just been, this is a place to go visit. So we're going to go take a small team, see what we learn. So that's Valor Collegiate.
Yeah, Dr. Reed.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what was the sense from the leadership teams after, going through this? I mean, how do they feel at this point compared to, before when we first launched this? Is there more of can you give a sense of take-up of this and how they're able to facilitate that at their school sites?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and of course, it's too bad that Dr. Ramirez is ill, because I don't want to be representing all of the elementary SLTs. So I'll tell you what I know, and you'll have to kind of extrapolate from there. I, along with other members of Ed Services, we sit in on SLT meetings. We're assigned to specific ones so we can go on a deeper journey with specific school sites. And so we've been able to be and participate and contribute, but mostly support and bear witness to kind of what, like you said, the sense of things is. I can report that there's an ever-increasing sense of agency and self-efficacy among members of SLTs. We have schools now that are in their 4th year of having the same really robust school-wide, well-established school-wide instructional focus. And at a high school of 100 teachers, being able to stay the course with an instructional focus that is that steadfast is really, it's key. You heard here at the last board meeting in the presentation about the CTE pavilion at Dos Pueblos. You heard Emily Shire invoke the school's SLT instructional focus, which was, I think a great testament to the fact that we have great programs, and maybe we've had great programs from years and years and years, but we want great educational learning experiences for all students. And so the linking of things as innovative as they can be with DPEA, the Dos Pueblos Engineering Academy, with all students at Dos Pueblos through this SLT experience, I think is another great testament to just how viable that has become. The last thing I would say, as far as what is the sort of how effective are the SLTs at influencing their teacher teams. Junior highs have a minimum day. Junior highs 4 times a year have a minimum day. And twice, on 2 of those 4 minimum days, it will be time for the SLT to access teacher teams and to lead their teacher teams with the support of the principal. Also recall that on October 21st, we have a student-free day. And we've already planned and committed to give that morning part of that day over to school leadership teams, to SLTs, again, to have the time and access to their teacher teams, to just continue deepening the work. Those are some answers.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask a question in a more simple way that I think you've already answered to some degree, but it's one that I get on campus, is for schools that the CASP scores are not improving, parents want to know that those teachers are getting the secret sauce or the tips from the other teachers. And I think that I hear you saying that. I just want to ask it directly so that I can convey, because there are some schools that are really excelling, one in particular, and a feeling like, how can we do what they are doing? How can we learn from that experience? Maybe you could speak to it next time when we actually get the scores. But that's where I'm most interested in, especially too with, when money is being raised privately to do curriculum specialists, or what other, techniques, or is that the best thing? Can these results glean some sort of assistance to the enhancements that parents are trying to make? That's really the nature of my question, if you can answer.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I have a 3-part answer. The first one is, I have to say that while we do have some standout schools, we have multiple schools. We talked about the Districts on the Move conference, but we have multiple schools on the move. So it really is about studying a pattern of achievement, because every school culture and climate and set of circumstances is unique. But what are the critical attributes that have resulted in success for that school, and to what extent do they apply to my context? And lots of times it's to a high extent, and sometimes it's to a less high extent. But that leads to the second part of my answer, which is, I hear you saying, in what way do teachers get to learn from one another, experiment and explore together, and share the secret sauce, as you put it? And there's infrastructure, to use that word, that's in place at the elementary school once monthly. In fact, I'm envious of some of the structures that exist for the elementary school teachers. So if I'm a 3rd grade teacher, I get to come together with all 3rd grade teachers in the district once a month for an afternoon. We're fortunate to have that. That is not common. So that's a really great tool. This year we will be bringing, it has been several years since we have pulled this off for high schools, but this year we will be pulling together English teacher leads, math teacher leads, and social studies and science teacher leads for cross-district collaboration. So some of the same things you heard Dr. Roundy Harder talk about that are coming out organically from the instructional materials pilot process in science, we are going to intentionally structure more of those kinds of experiences even outside of the pilot of instructional materials. It's happened in the past, but not in this era, not deeply in this era. The third thing I would say in responding is, the secret sauce is collective teacher efficacy. The secret sauce is sound pedagogy. Period. And so there's a complicated recipe of ingredients that go into building up collective teacher efficacy, which is the internalized sense that teachers have that what they do and what they have control over impacts students' outcomes and abilities. And there are external forces that are threats to that, and there are internal forces that are threats to that. And all of these conversations and collaborative meetings and data study sessions where we renew our values and are data informed are going toward cooking up that secret sauce of collective teacher efficacy. So there's not a silver bullet. I do think there's a secret sauce, but it's hard won.
Sure, absolutely. But is there more of an onus on the schools that are excelling? And I'm glad that there's you know, there certainly are many, but for those, more of an emphasis on those teachers or those principals to lean in and share, or, you know, share how they achieve what they have, or opportunities for that, I would say.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Yes, is the short answer.
Sure.
And carefully and thoughtfully is the caveat. So I risk sounding patronizing and responding this way and continue to respond in this way. But if you're somebody who has more than one child, as I do, you have to approach different, again, each culture, each student, each child, each school community has its own assets and challenges. Many of them overlap. We have some schools that are very differently configured and situated, and then we have some that are very like what we like to call similar schools. I can say that as a principal, I was always very keenly interested in my similar schools, more than just my schools that happen to be in the same district as me.
Sure.
Because that is, to me, a much more compelling way to unpack and explore and be curious about and to critique my own practices. So all of that coming from intrinsic desires to improve, which exist naturally in our staff and in our leaders, and creating the right time and spaces for that, which we do, those things are all happening.
Great. Thank you.
I think Raul has talked, Dr. Ramirez has spoken very pointedly to this, particularly for the elementary grade span when it comes to the very intentional pairing of schools in the SLT models. And I know that in the past that generated some questions, but that is a good expression of how some of that is occurring.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you, Ms. Carey. I think we've concluded this discussion item. Okay. Moving on to item I, coming events. Any coming events to talk about? I know we mentioned some of the back to school events, nights that are still coming. Anything else?
Yes, I wanted to share with the board. We've asked our teams to count how many board policies we could collect for the special board meeting next week. And it's a number that's not worth calling you together. I know that's...
I'm sorry, what?
There's a backlog, but again, getting ready for all these other board meetings. We have 9, and we just think to call you out for an evening for 9 policies. I think we're going to push that into October, and where we have space, we're going to move it into the regular board meetings. And then I know Dr. Reed is going to miss next board meeting anyway, so we're going to cancel our special board meeting next week.
Okay.
I know you're heartbroken.
That's an event. So that answers item K, which is next meeting. But let's go back to item J, future agenda items. I know we have our ongoing list. Any new additional agenda items to discuss? Okay. Well, with that, so that means we will amend item K, and answers my question about the 17th. So our next meeting will be Tuesday, the 24th. And with that, I will move to item L, which is adjournment.